The story began at the Music Bureau in Jingyang County, during the 10th year of Zhengguan. Outside a brothel, a hand with red nails rests lazily on the doorframe, and soon a curvy young woman shows up. She teases the young man outside, telling him not to rush and invites him in, saying she'll make tea and get everything ready. The man doesn't look too happy but still follows her into the room. A little later, the girl starts acting strange, sweating and twisting on the bed, saying she feels overheated and asks him to check. The young man calmly walks over, face completely blank. He places his hand near her neck, making her let out a comfortable sound, and right when she's asking for mercy, he suddenly tightens his grip. Her eyes widen, and strange energy starts leaking out of her body. Turns out, the guy is using Taoist techniques to suppress her hidden power. With a glowing talisman in his hand, his eyes shine brightly as he forces her to show her true form. Then the scene changes when we officially meet our main character. His name is Shinchangqing. He explains that he grew up in modern times, under a scientific, materialist upbringing, but somehow ended up in this ancient Tang dynasty society. And not in a good way either. He didn't become a prince, a noble, or even someone rich. He didn't get a cheat system either. He's just an ordinary guy trying to get by. To survive, he worked hard and managed to rent a super cheap 6-room house. But as soon as he gets there, he realizes he's been tricked. Frustrated, he rips up the contract papers, cursing how sneaky the brokers of the Tang dynasty are. Still, this rundown little house becomes the first step of his legendary life here. Walking inside, he sees talismans pasted all over the doors and sighs. The money's gone, nothing to do now. A gust of wind blows, peeling off some of the talismans. He shakes his head, complaining that this dirty little place doesn't even have cleaning services and yet has random things stuck everywhere. In the courtyard, there's a rusty iron sword stuck inside a strange yin-yang formation. Looking up, he notices cobwebs hanging from the ceiling, tangled with even more talismans. He stares at the sword and thinks to himself, no matter how smart he thought he was coming from modern times, dealing with these ancient tricks still leaves him feeling one step behind. With a sigh, he pulls out a cigarette, lights it, and takes a puff to calm down. As the smoke drifts upward, something surprising happens. The dead tree nearby suddenly sprouts fresh green buds. Then a sudden glint catches his eye. Curious, he walks over and sees what looks like an old sword. Thinking it's just scrap metal left lying around, he picks it up for a closer look. But the moment he touches it, the hilt snaps right off. Shinchangqing freezes, staring at the broken piece in his hand, muttering that now it's useless. He was hoping to at least use it for cutting grass or tilling the soil. Just then, a voice suddenly calls out from inside the house, making Shinchangqing jump in surprise. Someone inside is calling for help. He quickly tosses away his cigarette and frowns, thinking, wait a minute, didn't the broker say this place has been empty for ages? So why is someone here? Annoyed, he storms toward the room, shouting for whoever's inside to come out. But as he steps on the 8 trigrams formation, his footprint lights up in golden glow. He pushes the door open angrily, claiming that this is his house now and no one else should be inside. The moment the door opens, what he sees leaves him stunned. First, a pair of huge jade rabbits, then a young woman appears. She's beautiful, seductive, and keeps calling him young master in a sweet, soft voice. Shinchangqing's face turns red as he mutters to himself that he might have just fallen in love. But when the girl suddenly throws herself at him, he dodges out of the way, making her crash onto the floor. Instead of helping her up, he tries to act tough, saying she can't just touch him whenever she feels like it. The girl doesn't give up though. She grabs his belt and clings onto him, teasing that people in the Tang dynasty should learn to work hard instead of being lazy. She even presses against his back, whispering that she always relies on her own 2 hands to make a living. At this point, Shinchangqing feels an unexpected pressure on his waist and freaks out. Panicking, he cries out, calling her a female pervert, and quickly backs away, hugging himself for protection. Flustered, he insists she's definitely up to something, but he has no proof. Before he can calm down, the girl's body suddenly starts glowing with a strange aura. But Shinchangqing doesn't notice at all. Instead, he just keeps lecturing her, telling her it's late, she should go home, and that hanging around abandoned houses is dangerous because she might get stuck inside with no one to help. He even peels a talisman off the wall and warns her, saying he's heard rumors that this place might be haunted. The girl quietly asks if he's afraid of ghosts. Shinchangqing bursts out laughing and brags that he's a chosen time traveler, someone blessed by fate, immune to ghosts and spirits. Right at that moment, the painting on the wall comes alive. The celestial general's eyes move, glaring straight at him. Behind him, the girl finally reveals her real form, but he's still totally clueless, casually explaining that ghosts and monsters are just old superstitions made up to scare people. From outside, the whole house is now covered in a heavy, eerie aura. Somewhere far away, another figure suddenly appears. A high-ranking official bows to him respectfully, introducing himself as the city god of Jingyang County. He explains that 9 dangerous spirits are trying to merge together, and while their power is rising fast, he can only seal them temporarily. He apologizes for the trouble. But then, this man realizes something terrible. His ceiling formation has already been broken. Meanwhile, Shen Changqing is still inside, completely unaware of the danger right behind him. Instead, his eyes are glued to the shining gold coins under the table, sparkling like treasure. His face lights up like he just struck it rich. The female ghost creeps up from behind, ready to pounce, but Shen Changqing suddenly flips the table, making her slam right into it. He doesn't even notice, his full attention is on the shiny gold coins scattered on the ground. Laughing happily, he stuffs them into his pocket, already daydreaming about eating 2 extra meat buns the next morning. But then something strange happens. The coins in his pocket start glowing brightly. Shen Changqing freezes, shocked, wondering how his money suddenly vanished into thin air. Before he can react, the coins float out by themselves and form a strange space. That's when it hits him. This is a system, the ultimate cheat tool of a time traveler. Excited, he strikes a dramatic pose with a rose in his mouth, ready to explore its functions. But when the system panel pops up, his smile disappears. It says he only has about 72 hours of energy left, and unless he recharges, the system will erase him. It even tries to tempt him with a first recharge bonus, offering gold. Furious, Shen Changqing curses at it, calling it a scam, and angrily smashes the panel. Right then, the female ghost tries to act sweet again, saying she'll keep him company for the night. But instead of romance, she gets a heavy strike to the face. To his surprise, she doesn't get upset, she blushes, trembles, and clings to his arm with a shy look. Shen Changqing stares wide-eyed, completely confused, wondering why she's still here. The ghost suddenly collapses onto him, leaning against his chest, whispering that just touching him feels strange. Shen Changqing's face turns red, and embarrassed, he quickly tells her they should stop here and maybe meet again later. Before he can escape the awkward moment, the Taoist priest and the county official burst in, shouting, "Demon!" Shen Changqing freezes in shock while the ghost continues holding on to him. Both newcomers stand there speechless for a good few seconds, totally dumbfounded by what they're seeing. Finally, they point at the scene and ask each other if this is really the so-called dangerous spirit. They warn the ghost to release Shen Changqing, claiming she's using tricks to drain his energy. Hearing this, Shen Changqing panics, sweating nervously. He insists she was the one who started everything and it has nothing to do with him. In his head though, he starts imagining a flipped scenario, where the ghost is the victim, the Taoist and judge are the villains, and he's the poor innocent one caught in the middle. Determined to clear his name, Shen Changqing pushes the ghost away and tells them not to scold him unfairly. Looking frustrated, he lights a cigarette to calm down and mutters that he thought she was just some lost girl or someone who took the wrong turn. Turns out she's actually a runaway spirit trying to swindle his money. Outwardly he acts confident, but deep inside he's crying, because truthfully, he doesn't even have money to be scammed. Whatever little he had has already been eaten up by the system. The Taoist priest and the martial judge exchange suspicious looks after watching Shen Changqing. They whisper to themselves, how could this ordinary mortal push back that powerful ghost aura so easily, when even their formations failed? The martial judge steps forward, puffing himself up, and scolds Shen Changqing for being disrespectful to him, the mighty city god. But Shen Changqing doesn't buy it. Annoyed, he literally kicks the 2 strange men out of his house. He mocks their flashy clothes, calling them scammers, and even brags that if they're claiming to be the city god, then he's the Jade Emperor himself. To make things worse, he tosses the female ghost at them too and slams the door shut, shouting for everyone to leave him alone. Outside, the 2 men and the ghost stare at each other in shock. They suddenly realize that since stepping into his courtyard, none of their powers have been working. They start wondering if Shen Changqing is actually some hidden immortal. The martial judge looks down at the ghost and notices her aura has grown even darker. Nervously, he asks the Taoist how to deal with her. The Taoist priest panics and immediately runs away, saying he needs to get help from his master. The martial judge yells after him, begging not to be left alone, but it's too late. When he turns back, the ghost has transformed into an old, terrifying-looking woman. His frightened scream echoes through the night. Meanwhile, outside Shen Changqing's courtyard, a group of wandering souls appears. They sniff the air hungrily, talking about how intoxicating his scent is and how badly they want to consume it. They're convinced that his body belongs to them. From the mist, a delicate white foot steps forward, followed by a soft, furry tail. Soon, an incredibly beautiful young woman appears. With her perfect figure and dreamy eyes, she smirks seductively, saying it's no wonder demons from miles away are drawn here. She explains that even ordinary spirits could ascend instantly if they consumed his essence, and if she herself absorbed it, she could probably reach immortality on the spot. She pushes open the courtyard door, the wooden creak echoing sharply. The sound makes Shen Changqing clutch his head in pain, grinding his teeth. Finally, he bursts out of the door, furious, shouting at the top of his lungs that people should have some decency. It's the middle of the night and he just wants to rest. The moment he shouts, golden light suddenly radiates from his body, blasting away the fox spirit and the wandering souls. The fox spirit is thrown back into her original form and faints outside the courtyard. Later, at Ziku Mansion, the fox spirit slowly wakes up, realizing she was unconscious for hours. As she's still confused, shadows gather around her, forming into a vengeful female demon surrounded by thick, eerie energy. The demon condenses a ball of dark power in her palm, glaring with soulless eyes. The little fox spirit is so terrified her tail stands straight up. She cries out for help, trembling on the ground, unable to even stand properly. She realizes her magical powers are gone and curses, saying that golden light from last night really messed her up. The little fox spirit stares in horror as the demon approaches, its whole body wrapped in twisted faces made of dark energy. She panics, thinking her end has come. Just then, Shen Changqing casually opens his door and steps out, stretching. He greets the day cheerfully, even though it's still pitch black outside, and yawns, wondering if he woke up too early. Seeing him, the fox spirit immediately dashes toward him for help, only for Shen Changqing to unknowingly shut the door right in her face. She freezes on the spot, dumbfounded. Behind her, the demon creeps closer, whispering mockingly into her ear, calling her a lost little creature. The fox spirit is too scared to even reply. The demon laughs cruelly and declares it has caught a tasty snack. Terrified, the fox spirit screams in her heart that she's doomed, over and over again. But at that exact moment, Shen Changqing comes back out, golden light bursting from his body and scattering the dark energy all around. With a basket slung over his shoulder, he mutters to himself about having to head out early. He grumbles about the system draining both his money and his life, sighing at his bad luck. As he steps forward, his foot accidentally lands right on the fox spirit's tail. She yelps in pain and angrily protests, calling him the real mutt. Shen Changqing crouches down to take a closer look, scratching his head. He apologizes, asking whose dog spirit she is and why she's hanging around his doorstep. Then, with a mischievous grin, he reaches out to touch her fur. The fox spirit wants to shout that he's a shameless pervert, but stuck in animal form, she can't say a word. As his hand strokes her silky fur, she suddenly feels waves of spiritual energy pouring into her body. Shocked, she widens her eyes, wondering how his touch could carry such incredible power. The sensation is so comforting that she just gives in, lying down and letting him pet her while softly enjoying the warmth. Shen Changqing laughs to himself, amazed at how nice her fur feels. After a while, he notices something strange. He's no longer moving his hand, but the fox spirit is still squirming happily on her own. Proud of himself, he chuckles about his golden hand and how it really lives up to its name. Then, he stands up, heads toward the well, and waves goodbye. He tells the little fox that he's too poor to take her in, with no home, no shelter, and a system constantly demanding payment. He suggests she should go find herself a rich master instead. The little fox spirit faints from shock, then immediately jumps up to chase after Shen Changqing. She can't figure him out at all. Just last night, one roar from him scared off 100 ghosts, forced her to reveal her true form, and even stripped away all her powers. Now, even 9 vengeful spirits combined don't dare to show their faces around him. And that simple pat on her head earlier? It actually helped her break through a century of blocked cultivation. She's losing her mind over how outrageous this guy is. Meanwhile, Shen Changqing is rinsing his mouth. Without meaning to, he spits water all over her fluffy fur. He casually tells her to wake up, but the fox suddenly feels like she's bathing in divine spring water. Her eyes sparkle as she fans her tail and thanks nature's blessing. Shen Changqing glances at her while brushing his teeth, teasing, "You like me that much?" But before he can say more, a ghost suddenly appears right beside him, mouth wide open, ready to chomp down. The fox is so startled she nearly faints again. At that moment, the system panel pops up, showing Shen Changqing's remaining life ticking down, 62 hours. Then suddenly dropping to 48. A gold coin shoots out from the system, blasting through the ghost and making it vanish completely. The fox watches the coin zoom around like lightning, her eyes nearly falling out of her head in shock. But things aren't over yet. Shen Changqing suddenly feels a heavy force push him to the ground. His body goes weak, like all his strength has been drained. The system flashes again, 48 hours left, then plummets all the way down to just 14. He's left lying there with no energy at all. Seeing how bad things look, the little fox bites onto his clothes and drags him away from the well. The 9 vengeful spirits have already merged into one, their dark energy at its peak. She panics, thinking, they dared to ambush the immortal master? We need to escape now. As she pulls him along, Shen Changqing feels like his soul is floating into the clouds. His vision blurs, and even a horn seems to sprout from his head. In a daze, he shouts, "Puppy, don't misunderstand." Startled, the fox immediately lets go. Shen Changqing quickly stands up, brushing it off by saying he just got dizzy because he hadn't eaten breakfast yet, and it was nothing serious. The fox is completely convinced he's a master hiding his true power. She thinks he only pretended to faint, just to test her loyalty. Feeling smug, she reassures herself that she passed his test. Meanwhile, Shen Changqing stares at the system panel in horror. His survival time is down to 14 hours, and he's losing it. He shouts that even if he sleeps 8 hours, this is way too short. How is anyone supposed to live like this? To him, the system is nothing but trouble. The fox, on the other hand, watches him argue with thin air and secretly smiles. She thinks every word he says is some kind of profound wisdom her weak cultivation can't possibly understand. She vows to cling tightly to this immortal master, no matter what. At the same time, far away, a Taoist priest is reporting everything to his master. Soon, an old man riding on a sword flies over. He mutters that the expert from last night had weakened the 9 vengeful spirits at Ziku Mansion, so now is the perfect chance to subdue them. This man is Yuan Tiangong, the supervisor of the Great Tang's Imperial Astronomical Bureau. The Taoist priest quickly sends a message to his master, saying he'll go invite the martial judge and the city god of the underworld to help exorcise the ghosts and restore peace. Meanwhile, under the moonlight, old Yuan Tiangong studies the 8 trigrams diagram in his hand, energy swirling around it. He sighs quietly to himself, thinking, that mysterious expert broke the Great Three Yang formation. Could he still be here in Jingyang County? If fate allows, I must meet him and discuss the Tao. Curious about Shenchangqing, Yuan Tiangong starts calculating on his fingers, but no matter how he tries, he can't figure out Shen's background. Shocked, he wonders if Shen's cultivation might actually be higher than his own. Determined, he gathers his energy and heads toward the South Market. There, by coincidence, he spots Shenchangqing fortune-telling for a man. Shen stares at the man's forehead and declares dramatically, "Brother, your glabella is pitch black. A great calamity is about to strike you." The man breaks into a cold sweat. "But, weren't you just reading my palm? Now you're saying my forehead is dark." Shen responds smoothly, "Fortune-telling has many methods. Different paths, same truth. Why cling to the details?" Old Yuan Tiangong nearly chokes in outrage. In broad daylight, this brat dares to swindle people right in front of me. Suddenly, Shen stands up, pulls out a rolled-up painting, and with a flourish, it gleams with a mysterious light. He quickly rolls it back up and hands it to the man. "No worries, brother. Just hang this immortal ink treasure painting in your home, and no evil can harm you. Not $9.99. Not $8.88, only 10 taels of silver, and it's yours." The man's jaw drops at the price, sweating nervously as he hesitates. Just then, an old woman rushes over, loudly exclaiming, "Ah, Taoist Master Shen, our household mistress was possessed by a ghost, and it was you who saved her life." Shenchangqing nearly drools with pride. In his mind, he's already picturing himself one step away from becoming a legendary expert. Of course, he doesn't mention that he actually paid this woman to play her role, and since she's acting so well, he even considers giving her a bonus. The old woman then turns to the crowd and shouts, "How could someone deceive people in the middle of the market? That ghost was terrifying. Thankfully, Taoist Master Shen drove it away. Otherwise, my mistress would have died." The bystanders are stunned, but seeing her so sincere, they all believe it. The man who had his fortune told immediately throws a pile of silver into Shen's hands. "All right, Taoist Master Shen, I'll buy the painting." Shen pockets the silver with a confident grin, acting like the deal was destined all along. But at that moment, Yuan Tiangong finally snaps. He shouts loudly, "Wait, which sect does this so-called immortal belong to? Do you have an official identity certificate issued by the authorities? Which Taoist temple do you practice at?" Shen pushes up his glasses, frowning, and thinks, what's this old guy's problem? Is he trying to pick a fight? Before he can say anything, Yuan Tiangong points straight at him and bellows, "You rotten brat. You're still young. Instead of studying properly, you're out here scamming people. Today, I'll make sure you don't get away with this." Shenchangqing slams his foot on the table and refuses to back down. "Humph, and who exactly are you, old man?" The young man and the old man immediately start barking at each other, neither willing to give an inch. Yuan Tiangong scolds, "You rotten brat, you clearly don't know a thing about the Tao. Selling calligraphy paintings as charms? What a sham." Shen jabs a finger back at him, smirking. "Says who? Everyone's got their own methods. You say my painting doesn't work, where's your proof? Don't just flap your gums. Careful, or I'll sue you for slander." The crowd gasps. This kid even dares to argue evidence with Yuan Tiangong? Yuan Tiangong's face turns red with fury. He points to the old actress in the crowd and shouts, "She's clearly your accomplice. Do you really think you can fool me?" Shen doesn't even blink. Instead, he raises his middle finger and sneers. "Oh yeah? Yuan Tiangong my ass. If you're really Yuan Tiangong, then I'm Emperor Li Shimin himself. Shouldn't you be back at the palace playing with your abacus instead of picking fights with me?" Yuan Tiangong explodes, forming hand seals as golden light bursts from his palms. "How dare you take the sacred name so lightly? Heretic, watch as I crush you with my orthodox Taoist arts." Shen stiffens. Wait, this geezer actually knows magic? But before he can panic, Yuan Tiangong suddenly freezes in place, completely motionless. "Huh? Shen blinks, then mischievously doodles on the old man's palm like a bored child. Yuan Tiangong glares at him in shock, his decades of cultivation, his power, gone like smoke. Shen instantly flips the tables, pointing at Yuan Tiangong with a smug grin. Look at him, everyone. Clearly this fraud just wanted to chase me out and keep all the business for himself. Shameless, shameless. The crowd, caught up in Shen's bravado, starts chanting, yes, yes. Taoist Master Shen, drive this pest away. Meanwhile Yuan Tiangong stares at his own palm, muttering in disbelief. Impossible, how could my power vanish? In all my life, this has never happened. Shen puffs out his chest, hands on his hips, declaring, if you want your household safe and peaceful, if you want to ward off evil, then come to me, Taoist Master Shen. Finally snapping, Yuan Tiangong lunges forward, ready to overturn Shen's fortune-telling table. Even if I can't use my powers, I won't let you scam people in broad daylight. Oi! Careful, old man, my head's expensive, Shen yells. But before Yuan Tiangong can strike, the painting on the table suddenly shines with dazzling golden spiritual light. The Taoist aura surges skyward, stunning everyone. Yuan Tiangong's jaw nearly drops to the floor. This calligraphy contains the great Tao itself. How can a mere painting hold such terrifying power? Shen, meanwhile, grits his teeth, muttering darkly, if I don't earn money, I'll literally die. But if I go down, I'm dragging this old man with me. Before he can finish, Yuan Tiangong suddenly drops to his knees and kowtows. Senior, this junior was blind. I dared to slander a true master. Please forgive my offense. Shen's eyes bulge. What the hell just happened? Wasn't this guy yelling at me 2 minutes ago? The old actress immediately jumps back into her role, pointing dramatically. See? Even this Taoist was humbled by Taoist Master Shen's divine powers. Shen's little sidekick pipes up excitedly. Boss, this is perfect. Free advertisement, don't miss the chance. Shen Chongqing tapped his head with his fan like he just snapped out of it and muttered that, of course, making money was the real priority. Then he quickly put on a calm, serious face, acting all compassionate, saying he wouldn't hold grudges because the old man was also a cultivator and should understand cause and effect. Yuan Tiangong lowered his head, sweating buckets, and thought he must have underestimated Shen. To him, this was the true sign of someone who had reached a higher state, so simple yet so profound. He even reasoned that fate was set by heaven, and helping people too casually would go against that. But asking for a little silver was different. It was a show of sincerity and created good karma. The crowd, dazzled by the golden glow, gasped in amazement. They whispered that heaven's way was indeed clear and that they'd been blind to it all these years. Shen, on the other hand, just rolled his eyes. In his head, he grumbled, forget the fancy talk, just pay me already. At that moment, Yuan Tiangong pulled out a shiny black jade. He nervously said it was his most precious treasure and begged Shen to give him a piece of calligraphy to keep at home. Shen immediately grabbed the jade, turned it over in his hand, and asked what it was even for. Yuan explained it was called a heaven-mending stone. But Shen slammed the table, making the old man jump, and snapped, I don't need rocks. Don't you have anything useful? Panicking, Yuan suddenly held up a golden scroll to his chest and shouted his thanks, promising to study its meaning every day. Then he hurried off, clutching the scroll like it was sacred. The man who had his fortune told earlier looked confused and asked what about him. Shen waved his fan, saying not to worry, he had already planned for this. He pulled out another scroll, golden light spilling over the man's face, and told him it could ward off trouble. The guy didn't hesitate, he paid right away and hugged the scroll like it was treasure. Just like that, Shen's basket of random paintings suddenly became priceless in everyone's eyes. Meanwhile, over at Ziku Mansion, the martial judge was standing in Shen's small courtyard, holding a broom and gritting his teeth. He was upset that the strange energy was growing so quickly, even stronger than before. The young Taoist stared at his compass and said not to panic. His master had already arrived in Jingyang County, and he'd send word soon. But just as he said that, a sudden gust of wind rushed in. Before he could react, a blast of dark energy burst through the door, smashing his compass to pieces. In that critical moment, the martial judge leapt forward, channeled all his strength into the broom, and managed to grab hold of the energy. He shouted to his companion that now was the time to act. The Taoist quickly raised his hand and formed a seal, golden sparks flashing at his fingertips. Behind him, the 8 trigrams formation lit up and sent out a flying sword that shot straight into the purple stream of energy. The clash shook the whole house with a thunder-like boom. From outside, someone yelled angrily, asking who was wrecking their house. Both the Taoist and the martial judge froze in shock. Just then, the stream of dark energy started to fade away. And that's when Shen Chongqing stormed in from outside, grinding his teeth, asking what on earth they were doing. The moment he showed up, both the sword and the strange energy dropped flat onto the ground. Shen looked around at the ruined house, nearly in tears, and complained that he had only stepped out for a moment and everything was already destroyed. Then he noticed the broken doorframe and panicked even more. He had just rented this mansion. Furious, he pointed at the 2 men, accusing them of failing to swindle him last night, so now they'd come to make trouble instead. While he was busy scolding them, he didn't notice that the strange energy had slipped free from the sword sword behind him. The two men spotted it immediately and shouted for him to watch out. The energy twisted into a terrifying shape, radiating eerie power, and they both broke out in cold sweat. They stammered that there was a ghost right at his feet. Shen looked down in confusion, wondering what they were talking about. Right then, the ghostly figure lunged up as if it was about to grab his leg. Shen casually lifted his foot to check, then absent-mindedly stepped right on it. A cloud of smoke rose as the ghost was flattened, though Shen himself was clueless about what he'd done. He just stood there drenched in sweat, thinking something strange had happened. The leftover energy scattered and circled the room angrily, chasing Shen around as he ran in panic, muttering nervously about strange sounds. The two men, however, were stunned. With wide eyes, they declared that the 9 ghostly fiends that had haunted Jingyang County for 15 years had just been finished off with one step. The Taoist quickly stepped forward. He introduced himself as Li Chunfeng, disciple of Yuan Tiangong, and respectfully asked for Shen's name. Shen raised an eyebrow. Li Chunfeng? Yuan Tiangong? Then asked if Li was working at the Imperial Astronomical Bureau. Li admitted his cultivation wasn't high enough yet, so he hadn't joined. Shen then glanced at the martial judge, saying his face looked familiar, like the statue of a city god he'd once seen in a temple. The martial judge also stepped forward politely, introducing himself as the real martial judge from the city god's office. He apologized for the earlier misunderstanding and thanked Shen for not holding a grudge. Shen, still frustrated, lit a cigarette, took a deep breath, and muttered that folks in the Tang dynasty were too simple and honest. Then his eyes teared up as he complained. How was it possible that in just one day, he had run into 3 scammers? What kind of bad luck was this? He spread his arms dramatically, saying he didn't believe in any mystical powers, only in working hard to get rich. Then he pointed around at the mess of his broken house and demanded they talk compensation. The two just stared blankly, not understanding a single word. Shen got even angrier, pointing at their faces and explaining in simple terms. Civil means you pay me money. Criminal means I hand you to the officials, and you still pay me money. The martial judge was completely stunned, muttering that as a city god he only received incense. He didn't exactly have cash lying around. Li Chunfeng, on the other hand, thought maybe this expert was speaking in riddles with some deeper meaning. Shen didn't care. When they stayed quiet, he threw down his cigarette and shouted that if they wouldn't talk, then fine, let's go to the authorities. At that, Li Chunfeng quickly tossed him a money pouch with an awkward smile. The martial judge, broke and empty-handed, sighed that they hadn't seen scary ghosts, but poor ghosts, 3 of them standing right here. Li Chunfeng leaned in and whispered to Shen that it was all he had, but he could stay and help repair the house as compensation. Shen looked at the little bit of gold and silver in his hand, frowned, but finally nodded. All right, that'll do. He ordered them to gather bricks and clay and get to work. An hour later, the house was fixed up. Shen stood inside happily, calculating today's earnings. The stone from earlier could only be used as a paperweight. The old man's clothes were worth 2 taels of silver, and after paying a share to the auntie, he had 20 taels total. Just as he was counting the money, a beam of light hit his face, and the system panel appeared out of nowhere, sucking away every last coin. Shen panicked, shouting for it to leave him something. The system ignored him and updated his timer, then displayed that he had hit the first recharge milestone and earned 2 rewards. Shen's eyes lit up as the reward wheel spun, flashing with thousands of items. He was so excited, begging for something rare and powerful. But after all the dings, the system gave him 2 manuals. Shen opened them and nearly lost it. They were just guides on making fertilizer and brewing alcohol. He slammed them on the table, on the verge of crying, complaining that he was starving, and the system handed him this junk. With dark eye bags and his whole body shaking, he grumbled that normal people just couldn't play these pay-to-win games. After a while, Shen patted Li Chunfeng on the shoulder and told him not to hang around anymore. He joked that he wasn't running a free lodging, then politely sent him off, saying it was late and he'd already helped enough for the day. Just then, the little fox spirit ran in carrying a bag in its mouth. Li Chunfeng's eyes went wide, recognizing it as a fox immortal. Shen, meanwhile, just sat down, took the bag of food, and grumbled that bringing him gifts wouldn't work. He could barely feed himself, let alone a fox. Li Chunfeng whispered that it wasn't a dog but a fox, but Shen misunderstood and asked if Chunfeng was talking to him. At that moment, the fox spirit stood up on 2 legs, annoyed, as if saying, "Don't talk nonsense or you'll regret it." Shen only laughed, stroked its paw gently, and said if it insisted on staying, he'd let it. He even gave it a nickname, Xiao Bai. The fox spirit barked happily, clearly accepting. Later that night, high above the mansion, 2 dragons flew through the misty clouds. The smaller one called out to her sister, worried about their father's condition and wanting to find help. The older one suddenly noticed a flash of golden light and pointed it out. Both of them instantly transformed into elegant young women, sensing that the light contained powerful energy. They guessed it might be an immortal or some rare treasure, so they decided to check it out. Back in his room, Shen sat staring at the system panel, watching his remaining survival time tick down to just over 32 hours. He pouted miserably, his stomach growling nonstop, and banged his head on the bed in frustration, whining that he was starving and the system had taken all his money. To comfort himself, he even bit the bedsheet, close to tears, muttering that if things went on like this, he wouldn't even need the system to finish him off. He'd starve first. Just then, his door glowed with golden light, mixed strangely with ghostly energy. The little fox spirit noticed it and jumped onto the roof, wondering why the aura felt so mysterious. Under the moonlight, she suddenly felt her own power boiling over, an unstoppable urge rising in her heart, and she thought about how much she wanted to be with Shen. As she absorbed the surrounding demonic energy, her form shifted back to her true self, a young woman. Standing tall on the roof, she glared at the figures below, declaring that the ghosts who had been driven away earlier were now foolishly coming back to disturb Shen's rest. Below, the 9 lingering ghosts had merged into one, releasing a heavy, eerie aura as if preparing to devour everything in sight. Li Chunfeng turned pale, frozen where he stood. But the fox spirit didn't back down. She summoned her own power, and behind her appeared the majestic shadow of a great fox. The merged ghost roared back, forming a terrifying specter, and launched itself straight at her. Li Chunfeng stood behind the scene, shaking all over and breaking into a cold sweat. In front of him, the fox spirit and the ghost made from 9 restless souls were locked in a fierce clash. Meanwhile, Shen inside the room was still fast asleep, sprawled in bed in the most undignified way. Far away, the 2 dragon sisters were watching the battle in shock. The younger one gasped, saying the demonic aura was way too strong for a small place like Jingyang County. The elder lowered her gaze at the scene below and explained that the man in the room was like a shining beacon. No wonder the spirits couldn't resist gathering around him. Up close, the fight looked grand, filled with wild energy. But in reality, it was basically 2 women scrapping like rivals, tugging at each other as if arguing over a man. Just then, the dragon sisters descended from the sky, shouting at the foxes, demanding to know what demons dared to cause chaos here. The 2 foxes only looked confused but kept pulling at each other. The white dragon stepped up with a stern face, saying only strong demons could remain so bold in front of true dragons. The merged ghost glared at them and sneered, mocking the sisters as long worms, and claiming they were just here for the man too. It even offered to team up, suggesting they get rid of the fox spirit together and split Shen half and half. Hearing that, the fox spirit's expression darkened. Her claws pointed right at the ghost as she growled, furious at being mocked. She then exploded forward with a barrage of punches, shouting her title as the Fox Immortal of Qingqiu. She beat the ghost like someone venting on an X, each strike landing with frightening power. The dragon sisters were stunned to tears, wondering if the fox had practiced some extreme body strengthening technique. After her final strike, the fox stood surrounded by black energy, her eyes sharp and filled with fierce determination. The ghost was left barely holding together, only a fragment of its form remaining. The fox spirit glared ahead, gritting her teeth and challenging anyone else who wanted to step forward. The white dragon wasn't about to back down. She formed a hand seal and summoned her signature spell, calling thunder from the heavens. But just as the lightning was about to strike, a golden light screen appeared around Shen's courtyard, blocking the attack and bouncing it back. The white dragon was stunned. Her powerful spell had completely vanished. The fox spirit immediately charged at her, furious that anyone would dare cast magic around Shen's home. With a single earth-shaking punch, she sent the white dragon flying hundreds of meters away. When the white dragon crashed to the ground, she accidentally spotted a sword glowing with dazzling light. Her eyes lit up as she realized, there might really be a hidden expert here, someone who could even save their father. But before she could think further, the fox spirit was already charging at her again, refusing to let her rest as the battle continued. Li Chunfeng was hiding in a pile of straw, bawling his eyes out. He muttered in disbelief, wondering if this was really how immortals fought. Up in the air, the fox spirit suddenly shouted out the name of her ultimate technique and unleashed blazing flames. The white dragon refused to lose face and fired off her own big move, shouting just as dramatically. The 2 flew past each other midair like it was the climax of some epic stage play. The white dragon landed on the roof, still throwing out powerful skills with long, grand names. After a while, though, she was exhausted and just sat there glaring at the fox spirit. The fox wasn't having it. She lashed out with a kick, but the white dragon dodged, leaving a poor tree nearby to take the full impact instead. The white dragon leapt away to escape, and of course, the fox spirit gave chase. In her rush, though, she stepped on something black. Inside the room, Shen Changqing was just waking up, grumpy as ever. He rubbed his head and yelled about how noisy it was outside every night. He grumbled that if people didn't want to sleep, fine, but why keep others awake? Furious, he stormed out and yanked the door open. What he saw made him freeze. The white dragon had tied up the little fox with some kind of glowing rope, just like a pet. Shen immediately panicked, slammed the door shut, and muttered to himself that it must just be hallucinations from all the noise. To be sure, he opened the door again. This time he saw the fox turning the fight around spectacularly. Cold sweat broke out all over him. Mouth wide open, he blurted out, What's going on here? By then, the white dragon was pinned down while the fox spirit looked smug over her win. But Shin wasn't paying attention to who was winning. He was furious about something else, his missing dog. He yelled for Xiaobai, scolding the animal for not barking when so many people barged into the courtyard. When Xiaobai didn't answer, Shin stomped outside, raging about where his dog had gone. He stormed right up to the two women still fighting and shouted at them to cut it out. He demanded to know why they were brawling in his courtyard in the middle of the night instead of sleeping, and most importantly, where his dog was. The white dragon shot him an annoyed glare and told him to stop making noise, claiming she was saving his life. Shin didn't believe her at all. He grabbed her hand, accusing her of stealing his dog and insisting she come with him to see the authorities. The second his hand touched her, though, both women suddenly froze. Their bodies trembled as if some invisible power was pressing down on them. The white dragon's face went stiff, then a surge of power made her whole body react uncontrollably. She gasped, completely shocked, and demanded to know what kind of strange ability Shin had. Just one touch, and her energy felt like it was boiling over. Finally, she exhaled sharply and scolded him, revealing her identity. She said she was a princess of the East Sea Dragon clan and snapped that if she hadn't stepped in, the fox spirit would have already finished him off long ago. Shin Changqing shoved the little fox spirit aside, glared at the white dragon, and accused her of stealing his dog. She looked stunned, saying she didn't even know what he was talking about. But Shin didn't buy it. He gripped her hand tight and shouted that she was just pretending to be some princess, probably a fox in disguise, and demanded she show her true form. Then, out of nowhere, Shin started introducing himself in the most dramatic way possible. He lifted the white dragon with one hand and went on about how he was the heir of socialism, a man of modern society, a street cleaning pioneer, even runner-up in a children's Latin dance contest. Basically, he listed a whole bunch of random titles like he was announcing himself on stage. The white dragon, however, felt her powers completely restrained just from his touch. Her face turned red as she thought to herself that this man was definitely not normal. At that moment, her sister Xiaoqing tried to rush in to help, but the white dragon panicked and told her not to. Shin simply blocked with one hand and scolded them for resisting. On the side, Li Chunfeng and the fox spirit were just sitting there watching the chaos. Li Chunfeng was screaming in awe, calling Shin an expert for spinning the white dragon around like a toy. The little fox even praised Shin like a fangirl, while Li Chunfeng swore this was the first time in his life he'd truly seen what legendary cultivators could do. After twirling them around, the two dragon sisters were left shivering in the corner. Shin lectured them like a grumpy neighbor. He complained about barging into his house, making noise at night, and, of course, stealing his dog. He told them to confess where they'd hidden it. Right then, Li Chunfeng came running like the wind, dragging the little fox spirit in his arms. He proudly offered her up, saying this was Shin's dog. Shin froze and pointed at him, completely confused. Why was Li Chunfeng even here? He scolded him for sneaking back instead of going home after fixing the door like he was told. Li Chunfeng's eyes went wide, and he quickly knelt on the ground, pretending to be pitiful. With tears streaming, he begged Shin to accept him as a disciple, calling him immortal master and asking to be taught divine techniques. Meanwhile, far away in the early morning skies of Jingyang County, a black eagle soared through the air. It was no ordinary bird. This was the Black Eagle King, one of the 4 great demon kings. He landed on a lighthouse, staring at the golden glow shining in the distance. The light made him uneasy, but curiosity got the better of him. He muttered about how the Black Mountain Great King had sent him to scout the area, and yet here was this strange golden glow in the 9 Ghosts territory. His eyes narrowed as greed filled his heart. If it was really a treasure, he thought, bringing it back would make him leader of the 4 kings. Just imagining the other 3 bowing to him made him burst out in laughter. Half an hour later, Shin Changqing was sitting in his little house, looking dazed. In front of him, the dragon sisters and Li Chunfeng were kneeling like students waiting for a teacher. Shin waved them off, saying they had the wrong person. He was just an ordinary guy, no powers, no ghost-catching skills, nothing. He told Li Chunfeng to stop calling him Immortal Master and quickly leave. Then he turned to the 2 dragon sisters. According to them, their father was seriously ill and they had only passed by looking for medicine when they got caught up with the fox spirit. Shin sighed and said the whole dog-stealing thing had been a misunderstanding, but curing their father was beyond him. If they wanted help, they should find a real doctor. After that, Shin slung a basket over his back, frowned, and told everyone it was already morning. He had no breakfast to offer and needed to go earn a living, so they could just make themselves comfortable. Then he walked out the door. The Azure Dragon broke into tears, whispering to her sister that maybe they'd upset the Immortal Master, and that's why he wouldn't help. She thought since the fox spirit seemed to be his pet, they would need to show even more sincerity. Li Chunfeng politely introduced himself, bowing with great respect. As Shen walked away, the three of them watched him go. From inside the basket, the fox spirit poked out its head, sticking out its tongue and teasing them like a mischievous child. A little later, Shen arrived at the market with the fox spirit in tow and started setting up a stall. He slapped the table dramatically, striking a cool pose as he announced his shop was open. Immediately, a crowd formed. People shouted for him to read their fortunes first, waving silver, convinced he was the real deal after scaring off that Taoist before. But just as things were heating up, a county official arrived with a group of guards. It was Magistrate Feng. He pushed through the crowd, pointed at Shen, and accused him of being a street swindler. Shen jumped onto the table, furious, demanding to know who had reported him. Before he could finish, two guards pressed their staffs to his neck. Right then, the martial judge came running, shouting for Shen. He pointed to the distance, warning that something terrible had happened at the Ziku mansion. Magistrate Feng looked up and saw dark energy rising from Shen's courtyard like smoke, covering the sky. People gasped, saying the Ziku mansion was haunted and wondering how something so strange could appear in broad daylight. But Shen just squinted at the sky and saw nothing. He muttered that it looked perfectly clear to him. Magistrate Feng froze in confusion, while Shen turned on the martial judge with a gloomy face, accusing him of making up stories to mess with him. Meanwhile, back at Shen's small courtyard, the Black Eagle King was rummaging through everything like a burglar. He flipped tables, tossed things around, muttering to himself about the treasure he'd seen glowing earlier. But no matter where he looked, nothing turned up. Scratching his head, he wondered how a vision of golden light could appear and then leave no trace at all. Meanwhile, the market was packed shoulder to shoulder, buzzing like a festival. People were shouting for everyone to come see. Apparently Taoist Master Shen was about to deal with the old spirit haunting the Ziku mansion, the one the whole county had been afraid of for years. Hidden in the roadside bushes, the Dragon Sisters and Li Chunfeng were spying. Hearing the chatter, they gasped in excitement, convinced that their immortal master had returned. Out on the street, Shen Chongqing strutted forward like a refined young scholar, fanning himself with a folding fan. Behind him, the martial judge held a tall flag, and Magistrate Feng carried another banner, looking all official. The little fox spirit dashed by the bushes, giving the three eavesdroppers a playful slap each that sent them tumbling. Then the fox spirit transformed into her human form, scolding them. She said they couldn't even guard their own home, yet they still dreamed of learning from the expert. She warned that the one inside the courtyard was the Black Eagle King, one of Black Mountain's top followers, far too much for them to handle. When they looked worried, she snorted, saying they should just watch, because even if Black Mountain's leader himself showed up, her master would still turn him into nothing. Inside the yard, the Black Eagle King pricked up his ears. He faintly heard words like Black Mountain and expert, and suddenly panicked. He remembered his boss warning him about powerful people in the mortal world, and he wondered if he had stumbled into a trap. Soon after, Shen and the others reached the courtyard. The martial judge looked serious and told Shen that the place was dangerous. He said he'd stay outside to keep the civilians safe and leave the spirit inside for Shen to handle. Magistrate Feng, on the other hand, said if Shen could handle this haunting, he'd admit the young man wasn't a fraud. But deep down, Feng smirked to himself. If Shen failed, he'd use this chance to scare others into obeying the law and boost his own authority. Back inside, the Black Eagle King was getting nervous. He muttered that someone had mentioned an expert coming and decided he couldn't stay here any longer. He'd come back later to search for the treasure. With that, he rushed toward the wall, trying to slip through. But just as he tried his escape trick, an unseen force blocked him, and he slammed right into the wall. Stars spun around his head, leaving him dizzy and dazed. Just then, Shen Chongqing heard the noise inside and pushed the door open. He thought the thumping must have been a rat and even muttered about how big it sounded. The Black Eagle King, who was hanging from the ceiling, nearly choked when he heard that. Rat? Is he calling me a rat? I'm a great demon king. He glared down, but Shen didn't even look up. He was too busy hugging a mirror and turning it around like a fool. Outside, the martial judge and Magistrate Feng's group stared hard at the closed door. Since it was quiet, the judge proudly whispered that the expert must have already handled the spirit inside. Meanwhile, Shen sat at the table, staring at two manuals, a lighter, and his iPhone 15 Plus. He grumbled to himself, worrying that if his performance flopped, he'd lose his livelihood, or worse, get tossed into jail. Right then, his lousy system gave him a reminder that his survival timer was still ticking. Shen sighed, saying he had no choice but to use his wits to get through this. Then his eyes landed on the phone, and he smirked. He thought, maybe I can use this thing, not just to get out of trouble, but maybe even to make some money. He quickly started swiping and opened up his downloads. Turns out, he still had a bunch of movies saved from before he time traveled. But the moment he hit play, strange noises blasted out. From outside, the martial judge and Feng froze in place, looking totally confused. Feng stiffly muttered that the sounds must be ghosts messing around, but he couldn't figure out why their cries sounded so weird. Inside, Shen panicked, swiping furiously and muttering about shaky hands, glad nobody else was around to see his mistake. Up on the ceiling, the the Black Eagle King nearly fell off in shock. He stared at the phone, convinced it was some kind of magical tool that could chant spells automatically. The problem was, he had never heard of any incantation that went Yamit or Aya Aya. Oblivious, Shin lifted the phone, struck a handsome pose, and snapped a selfie. The camera flash suddenly lit up the whole room, blinding the Black Eagle King. He shrieked, clutching his face, certain that Shin had finally launched a hidden attack. His whole body trembled as he thought, this mortal knew I was here all along, just waiting for the perfect chance to strike. Meanwhile, Shin happily kept snapping selfies, grinning at his reflection. He had no idea the Black Eagle King was silently clinging to the ceiling, sweating buckets, and muttering to himself about how cruel and cunning humans could be. Outside, Magistrate Feng was already losing patience. He warned that if Shin Changqing didn't come out soon, the officers would drag him out. The martial judge just closed his eyes and muttered that doubting an expert like Shin was foolish. Right then, Shin finally walked out, acting calm. He reminded everyone how this mansion had been haunted for years with no one able to handle it. But today, he claimed he had already sealed the spirit inside. To prove it, he proudly showed them his phone screen, where a terrifying figure appeared. The crowd froze, completely spooked. A cold mist seemed to rise from the ground, and some even swore they saw a ghostly woman crawling up from the well, scratching the ground with sharp nails. Everyone went pale, breaking into a cold sweat. Even the martial judge admitted the resentment was way heavier than what they had seen before. Shin quickly reassured them that the spirit was already trapped inside his treasure mirror, so it couldn't harm anyone anymore. To make it more convincing, he even played the video backward and forward, saying he could control it however he wanted. But just when everyone was buying it, he accidentally swiped to something else, an awkward scene of a girl making strange noises. Shin didn't notice and kept shaking the phone, bragging about how strong he was. The crowd, instead of realizing the mistake, went wild with praise. They shouted that Shin was an immortal master who could play with even the fiercest spirits like it was nothing. Magistrate Feng nervously pointed out that the treasure mirror had gone dark. Shin awkwardly muttered that the battery had just died, then quickly stuffed the phone back into his robe. He coughed a few times and smoothly changed the subject, saying that mortals had already seen enough. He warned them the house was now contaminated with energy, so keeping it peaceful would be hard. Luckily, he said, he had been studying protective calligraphy and could write charms to keep homes safe. The moment he said that, people rushed forward with money pouches, begging for talismans. Even Feng's expression changed, and he joined in the line like everyone else. Soon, the crowd was buzzing. Some said they'd been waiting since dawn, others argued about cutting in line. Word spread fast, and more people from all over the county started queuing, wanting Shin's charms. Two young men even came out holding freshly written talismans. One was laughing, the other crying. They said Shin's hand was so swollen from writing that it looked painful, but still, he kept working for the people. Someone quickly corrected them, insisting it wasn't swelling but qi overflowing from the master's hand. By the end of the day, the whole county had been stirred up, but poor Shin's hand was so cramped it looked like a twisted claw. He sighed, invited everyone to stay for a meal, and joked that after all that writing, his hand had basically turned into a printing press. Shin Changqing struggled to push the door open with his cramped, claw-like hand, but right outside were four starry-eyed fanatics staring at him. He froze, then quickly slammed the door shut again. Inside, he tossed a handful of gold coins into the air, laughing like he'd just won the lottery. Finally, he thought, he didn't need to bow down to the system anymore. He was rich. Meanwhile, the martial judge and the dragon sisters overheard him and got all excited. To them, Shin keeping them for a meal meant he was acknowledging them. The fox immortal, though, couldn't help but feel a little worried, like she was about to lose favor. Just then, golden light suddenly burst out in the courtyard, and a mysterious voice echoed. The fanatics outside stared in awe, thinking the great expert was making a move again. Up on the ceiling, the poor Black Eagle King took the hit, his body twitching. He was speechless, first fists, now golden light. What had he done to deserve this? Shen, on the other hand, just sighed at the coins vanishing, grumbling that his money was gone before he even got to enjoy it. But then something amazing happened. His survival time shot up by hundreds of hours. Shen quickly clasped his hands, begging the system to give him another trick. The system responded with a recipe for making handmade soap: grind seashells, add water and ash, pour it into molds, and let it sit for 10 to 30 days. Shen's eyes immediately lit up like coins. Soap was unheard of in this era, and if he could make it, the profits would be huge. The excitement didn't last, though. He stared at his empty chest and turned pale. Soap took at least 10 days to finish, and he only had 10 left. He slumped down, feeling completely hopeless. At that moment, a loud thud startled him. The Black Eagle King finally fell from the ceiling, feathers scattering everywhere. Shen blinked in surprise, then curiously walked over and grabbed him. To Shen, it wasn't a mighty demon king, it just looked like a huge wild chicken that had somehow flown inside. Laughing, he lifted it onto his shoulder, saying this poor thing must have been trapped and starving. Tucking the wild chicken under his arm, he walked outside and announced that he was a kind person. He didn't even dare to step on grass, let alone harm a creature. Li Chunfeng and the dragon sisters peeked out, whispering to each other. Some thought he might be using resurrection magic on a demon king, which sounded dangerous. Others were moved by his compassion, saying that in the eyes of such an immortal master, all beings were equal. Then they started dreaming. If he could even revive a demon king, surely curing their father's illness would be nothing for him. When the fanatics saw what Shin Changqing was cooking, their eyes went wide. At first, they thought he was just roasting beans, but then they realized it was the wild chicken from earlier. Instead of a nice smell, though, thick mystical energy started pouring out of it. They huddled together, whispering nervously. Everyone knew that eating the flesh of powerful creatures was dangerous, and this was supposedly a demon king. How could the expert possibly eat that? But Shin didn't care. He happily skewered a piece of juicy meat and invited everyone to try his cooking. The four fanatics instantly turned pale, making excuses to escape. One said he suddenly had urgent business, another claimed his mom wouldn't let him stay out late, another quietly backed away, and the last one just clung to her sister in tears. The white dragon, however, stepped forward bravely, saying she would try it first. Before she could, the food vanished in a flash. Everyone looked again, only to see the little fox spirit chomping down on a massive chicken leg. Shen was furious, telling it to spit it out, but the fox ignored him and kept savoring the meat, slowly absorbing all the energy inside. The dragon sisters gasped, amazed that the fox spirit was testing the food for them. Even among foxes, there are good ones, they thought. Soon, only bones were left. But then the fox suddenly staggered, looking dizzy, and collapsed to the ground. Everyone panicked, thinking it might be in danger. Shin checked and confirmed it was still alive, though strangely, its expression looked way too happy. To everyone's shock, the fox suddenly jumped up and started dancing around, saying it felt amazing, like its whole body was overflowing with spiritual power. The white dragon was stunned. How could it survive something so strong? Shin just shrugged and cut up more meat, offering it to Li Chunfeng and the martial judge as thanks for their help that day. The two hesitated but eventually took it. The fox spirit, looking blissful, reassured them that his cooking was beyond imagination, even better than legendary heavenly fruits. The dragon sisters were already crying tears of joy as they stuffed more meat into their mouths. As soon as Li Chunfeng and the judge finished eating, they suddenly felt bursts of spiritual energy. Their bodies lit up as they struggled to control the overwhelming power. The sisters also felt their cultivation rise rapidly, blue and yellow light shooting into the sky from Shen's small courtyard. They hugged each other, amazed at their breakthroughs, calling his roasted meat a true delicacy from the immortal realm. Shen stood proudly with his hands on his hips, grinning. With this kind of cooking, he bragged, these ancient folks simply couldn't resist. If he opened a barbecue shop, even the emperor himself would have to line up for a taste. Li Chunfeng and the martial judge couldn't hold back their energy anymore. Power burst out of them as they grabbed each other and started spinning around like they were dancing the tango. One of them shouted that the roasted meat had so much spiritual energy it felt like they might grow wings and fly. The other agreed, saying their body was overflowing with power. Shin Changqing watched with wide eyes, muttering that the scene was getting way too spicy for him to handle. Then, the white dragon suddenly thought of her father still suffering back in the dragon palace. Tears filled her eyes as she cried about how unfilial she felt, enjoying herself here while he was still in danger. Shin looked at her, confused, and joked that he didn't even add chili, so why was she crying? Right after, the dragon sisters knelt down and begged Shin for medicine to save their father, saying they'd serve him loyally for life. Shin rolled his eyes and reminded them that he didn't know medicine. But then he paused, thought for a moment, and came up with an idea. Why not stay by his side and help him? Once he earned money, they could use it to cure their father's illness. The two sisters immediately agreed to follow his arrangements. Meanwhile, far away in the dark forest outside Jingyang County, glowing eyes appeared in the shadows. A massive tiger stepped out, sniffing the air. This was the Golden Star Tiger King, one of the 4 great demon kings. It grumbled about its missing scout, wondering why the bald bird hadn't returned yet, saying it was starving. Morning soon came. Birds chirped, flowers bloomed, and Shin Changqing's cheerful singing echoed across the courtyard. The dragon sisters paused in their meditation to listen. The white dragon and the martial judge were so moved they burst into tears, claiming it was the rhythm of the Tao itself, and they needed to focus and comprehend it. The fox spirit just frowned, mumbling that they really didn't get how the world worked. Inside his room, Shin hummed happily while staring at his system panel. For the first time, he felt at ease, finally able to wake up naturally without worrying about his survival time running out. Then his eyes fell on the display of a jar of fine wine. He figured mid-grade wine would be the fastest way to make money. With his modern cooking skills, he could set up a barbecue stall, sell roasted chicken and duck, and even have the dragon sisters help as servers. Who in this ancient era could resist that? The thought made his face flush. With a sly smile, he opened the door and stepped outside, already daydreaming about his grand plan. Early in the morning, Shin Changqing stepped out of his room and was immediately startled by Dong Li's loud voice asking if he had any orders for the day. He jumped and complained she almost scared him half to death. Still, since the sisters had already decided to follow him as servants, he pulled out a stack of money and handed it to her. Their mission was simple: go buy wine, but don't get ripped off at small shops. He also told them to pick up some good bamboo along the way since that didn't cost anything. The sisters agreed right away and hurried off. Not long after, the martial judge came forward and politely said his work here was done, so he should return to the city god temple. Shen waved him off, letting him go. As the judge left, he muttered under his breath that Shen sure knew how to put on an act. Then Li Chunfeng stepped up, smiling confidently. Shen thought he was leaving too, but Li Chunfeng explained that his cultivation was weak and he wanted to stay, follow Shen, and learn from him. Shen didn't mind, free help was always welcome, so he agreed. A little later, Shen, Li Chunfeng, and the little fox spirit walked together through the bustling marketplace. Vendors were shouting everywhere, selling everything from steamed buns to scissors. When they got to the wine stalls, Shen nearly cried looking at the prices. Even the cheapest jars cost a fortune. He grumbled to himself that back in modern times, cheap liquor was everywhere thanks to technology and mass production. Here though, he didn't have the capital to make that happen. With a sigh, he decided he'd have to start small and sell roast duck first to earn some money. While he was stressing over it, Li Chunfeng patted his shoulder and told him not to worry about money since he had already grasped the essence of creation. Shen got annoyed at that and pointed at a plump young lady walking by, asking Li what he saw. Li Chunfeng replied that she looked like a noblewoman. Shen shook his head and explained that ordinary people only saw her fancy clothes, while cultivators saw her destined fortune. But what most people missed was that the things around her, like gold, weren't just mundane objects. He went on to explain that gold wasn't ordinary at all. It was formed from ancient stars, carried into this world before heaven and earth fully took shape, tied to the dragon veins for countless years. Yet people only dug it up to make jewelry, never realizing it was as old as the world itself, carrying the essence of creation. Li Chunfeng listened with his mouth wide open, completely stunned. He dropped to his knees, bowing again and again, admitting he had been too shallow, always treating things as ordinary objects. Shen Changqing, meanwhile, was laughing to himself inside, thinking, heh, small trick. I'll fool him so much he won't even know which way is north. In the end, he'll just end up being the bodyguard for my roast chicken shop. Li Chunfeng then looked up sincerely, saying his cultivation had been stuck for years, probably because he was too caught up in worldly distractions. Thanks to Shen's words just now, he felt he was only one step away from a breakthrough. He begged for more guidance. Shen put on a serious face and leaned in close, whispering something that sounded deep and mysterious. The value of life has two sides. It shows in what you contribute. Ideals create a new world, and hardship builds the foundation in your heart. Of course, what he was really doing was reciting a bit of philosophy from the future. Li Chunfeng repeated those words over and over, looking like he had just unlocked a secret of the heavens. He even started laughing and crying at the same time, saying the demon in his heart that had blocked him for 3 years was finally gone. He bowed again, promising he would never forget these lines and would keep chanting them for life. Shen smiled smugly, thinking, future knowledge really works. This guy is totally hooked. Time to push a little further. So he asked Li Chunfeng a serious question. In this world, people could practice countless mystical arts to try and reach immortality. So why did so many still fight to become emperor instead? Li Chunfeng thought hard, then explained that of course rulers also wanted long life, but true immortality was nearly impossible. Even with cultivation, most people only lived a few decades longer, and very few reached 100. The word immortality was something people longed for, but almost no one achieved. The moment he finished, Shen Changqing's whole body seemed to glow. He chuckled and said, "Immortality? That's not so hard. If you think about it, I've already lived more than 1,000 years. Right now it's the Tang dynasty, but before I time traveled, it was already the 21st century. From then until now, that's at least 1,300 years of life." When Li Chunfeng heard that Shen Changqing had lived for more than 1,000 years, he was completely stunned. His face turned serious, and he thought, only an immortal could do that. He must be a celestial being. With that thought, he asked nervously if following the path of cultivation could also help him live forever. Shen Changqing hid his grin behind his fan, thinking, he's fallen for it, he. Then he turned away, trying to look all mysterious, and said that if Li Chunfeng followed him for 2 or 3 years, it wouldn't be a problem. Hearing this, Li Chunfeng was overjoyed, his eyes wide and sparkling like he'd just struck gold. He quickly asked if Shen would accept him as a disciple. Shen then put on a glow of white light and said he normally didn't take students, but since Li had shown determination, he'd reluctantly take him on as a registered disciple. Without hesitation, Li Chunfeng dropped to his knees in front of everyone, asking Shen to accept his bow. Shen immediately started sweating, waving his hands like, enough, people are watching. He reminded him that he already had a master, Yuan Tiangong, so he wouldn't teach him Taoist techniques. But since he had called him master, he'd still take care of him, starting by asking him to carry some groceries. Soon, the two of them came back from the market with chickens and ducks in their arms. Li Chunfeng looked puzzled and asked if they were for dinner. Shen grinned and said this was his money-making secret, and Li would soon understand. Not long after, they were testing out the roasting oven. The ducks turned golden and crispy, the smell filling the air, making both their mouths water. Shen brushed honey over the skin, sprinkled spices, even poured some beer over it, turning the ducks into a mouth-watering masterpiece. By the time the sun had set, the two were still busy with the roast. Shen wiped his forehead and wondered why Dong Li and Little Qing hadn't come back yet. It was way too late for just buying wine. Just then, Magistrate Feng rushed in with 2 guards, panic written all over his face. Shen quickly helped him steady himself and asked what was wrong. The magistrate explained that something strange had happened at 10 Mile Village. The Hong family's old mansion was in chaos, and an entire household had been mysteriously finished off by a demon. When Shen Changqing heard the word demon, his face instantly turned pale. "What, are you serious?" he asked, clearly unhappy. Not long after, he and Li Chunfeng arrived at the Hong family's mansion. The air was heavy with sorrow, neighbors whispering about how tragic it was that all 3 members of the Hong family were gone. Some said the place had always been haunted, that misfortune seemed to follow anyone nearby, and now this disaster proved it. Others quickly urged each other to leave before they too caught the same bad luck. Shen stood stiff, eyes wide, clearly shaken. He and Li Chunfeng went closer to look at the scene. The villagers kept muttering that it had to be the work of demons. Some even claimed 10 Mile Village used to be a giant tomb, and the Hong family had been living right on top of it, constantly surrounded by unclean energy. Magistrate Feng wiped his forehead nervously, admitting that strange deaths had been happening in the Hong family for years, but the officials never found the cause. Now with the entire household gone, things were completely out of control. He added that normally this would be a case for the Imperial Astronomical Bureau, but since the people were panicking, they needed Shen's help. Li Chunfeng immediately stepped up, assuring the magistrate that since he worked for the bureau, he couldn't ignore this. And with his master here, nothing bad could stand against them. Shen's face went dark at that. Inside, he was thinking, why are you dragging me into this? I never agreed to this mess. I'm not a ghost hunter, I just write. But out loud, he forced a smile and cleverly shifted the responsibility, praising his disciples' skills and suggesting that Li handle it as a test. Magistrate Feng, however, suddenly remembered something worse. He said some villagers had seen 2 young ladies from Shen's household taken away by demons. Shen quickly waved his hand, insisting it wasn't demons but probably wild animals. Then it hit him what Feng had just said, his eyes widened. Wait, who did you say was captured? Before anyone could answer, a shout rang out, ordering hunters to gather immediately. Meanwhile, in another location, the 2 dragon sisters were trapped, sitting on a pile of eerie white bones. The younger one trembled, whispering she didn't want to die. Her sister comforted her, saying not to worry, the immortal master would come. Just then, a loud, mocking laugh filled the air. The beast holding them, Man Shan, sneered at the mention of an immortal master. The older sister glared at him, warning him to let them go, declaring her identity as a princess of the Dragon Clan, daughter of the East Sea Dragon King. But Man Shan only laughed harder. He mocked her claim, saying it didn't matter who she was. He revealed his own background proudly. His father was the Tiger King Man Shan, one of the 4 great lords under the Black Mountain Great Immortal. And to him, weak Dragon Clan members were nothing more than spoils for his master's enjoyment. Little Qing was terrified, crying that she didn't want to become anyone's concubine. Meanwhile, at the edge of the forest, Shen Changqing's group had already started their search. The hunters reported that they'd found fresh tiger tracks and were confident they could follow them straight to the beast's hiding place. Li Chunfeng, worried about the danger, told Shen that it was too risky to let the hunters get involved with such a fierce creature. But the hunters just laughed it off, proudly saying they had plenty of experience and had even hunted a tiger together last year. Shen sighed and rubbed his forehead, agreeing that the hunters were indeed skilled, but he couldn't stop worrying about Dong Li and Little Qing, whose safety was still unknown. After a while, the group came across a cave. The hunters quickly checked around and confirmed it was the only entrance. Plans were being made when Li Chunfeng pulled out his 8 trigrams compass. The moment he used it, the tool glowed with golden light, revealing the truth. The creature inside was no ordinary beast but the Golden Star Tiger King Man Shan, ranked on the Bureau's wanted list with a danger level of 4 stars. Li Chunfeng admitted to himself that he was no match for such a powerful enemy. Determined, he took out a glowing charm and began writing spells across the compass, setting up a formation to seal the monster inside. Just as he was deep into the ritual, a hand suddenly patted his shoulder. Startled, he spun around and saw Shen Changqing. In that instant, the formation fizzled out. Shen casually told him to stop playing around and go help the others. Li Chunfeng protested, saying this wasn't a normal tiger but a dangerous demon king. Shen waved it off, saying they'd talk about magic later. After they caught the beast, he'd even teach Li some immortal realm techniques. Hearing that, Li's eyes lit up with excitement. Inside the cave, Manhwa the tiger was snoozing on top of a pile of white bones, looking content. The two sisters nearby were drowsy too, but worry was written all over their faces. Suddenly, Dongli sniffed the air and woke up. She felt movement outside and whispered to her sister that many people had arrived. It had to be the immortal master coming to save them. Back outside, the rescue plan looked a bit unusual. Shen Changqing was holding a drum, and poor Li Chunfeng had been made to wear a tiger head costume. Li, completely unsure, asked if this plan could actually work. Shen just laughed and said, "We'll find out soon enough." Right after Shen Changqing shouted, he banged the drum and yelled for the tiger to come out. The noise was so loud that Manhwa woke up, annoyed that someone dared disturb his nap. Shen tried to keep drumming happily, but something startled him, and he dropped everything with a loud, "Oh my." Li Chunfeng, still stuck inside the tiger head, was so scared he nearly fainted. Everyone froze when they saw it. Manhwa walked out of the cave, eyes glowing cold, looking huge and terrifying. The younger folks gasped, wondering how a beast could grow that big. But instead of panicking, Shen suddenly started doing a goofy lambada dance, shouting for Li Chunfeng to copy him. Li was sweating buckets, wondering if this so-called magic even worked, but still shook his hips like he was told. Under the moonlight, he even turned the tiger head to give a playful little pose. To everyone's shock, Manhwa actually saw the tiger head as a cute tigress. His eyes lit up, and he rushed forward, totally smitten, trying to get close. Poor Li was inside thinking, what kind of trick is this? Since when could Master charm a demon king like this? But before he could figure it out, the tiger's sudden embrace nearly knocked him over. Meanwhile, Shen gave the signal, and hundreds of men jumped from the bushes. A giant net flew out, trying to trap Manhwa, and right after that, archers fired wave after wave of arrows. Manhwa roared in anger, calling the humans despicable, while arrows thudded into the ground dangerously close to Li Chunfeng. He screamed that he was still down there and begged not to get shot. Some hunters complained that the tiger's skin was so tough, the arrows barely went through. Others started daydreaming about how much the pelt would sell for if they brought it into the city. Shen, overhearing that, suddenly got excited too. His eyes lit up with dollar signs, thinking about how much money the skin was worth. Manhwa grew furious and swung his claws, releasing waves of energy that knocked people back. In the chaos, Li Chunfeng's fake tiger head fell off, exposing him. He looked up nervously at the giant beast towering over him, forcing a shaky smile and greeting him awkwardly. Hey there, tiger brother." Manhwa got furious and gathered his strength, aiming a massive punch right at Li Chunfeng's head. Li panicked and screamed for his master to save him. Shen Changqing's eyes went wide. He shouted for Manhwa to let go, then rushed forward and stabbed his sword straight at the tiger's weak spot. Manhwa froze, trembling from the pain, then let out an ear-splitting roar that shook the whole mountain. And just like that, the mighty beast collapsed to the ground, completely finished. Everyone stared in shock. One sword strike, and it was over. Magistrate Feng praised Shen for being both smart and strong, calling him a true hero. Shen, of course, acted humble, saying it was all thanks to the magistrate's leadership. Meanwhile, poor Li Chunfeng stood off to the side, muttering to himself that the tiger was supposed to be indestructible. Then he realized, Master must have already known the weak point all along. Holding his nose, he went to pull the sword out, muttering that he finally understood why Master could pierce through the tiger's defenses with just one strike. Suddenly, Shen remembered the sisters and called out in worry. Magistrate Feng reassured him that people had already gone inside to search. Right then, Dong Li and Little Qin came running out, calling for him. Overcome with emotion, they rushed into Shen's arms, thanking him over and over. Shen patted Dong Li's head gently, smiled, and told them it was fine now. They were safe. Dong Li gave him a shy, playful glance and softly echoed his words, "Let's go home." When they returned to Jingyang County, the whole place lit up like a festival. Drums pounded, fireworks went off, and red flags fluttered with the words, "Tiger-slaying hero." The guards proudly carried the massive beast behind them, while people cheered about how Taoist Master Shen had finished the tiger with one strike and saved the county. With a big red flower pinned to his chest, Shen smiled like he owned the place, joking that he'd just become the ruler of the southern region. Then he leaned close to Magistrate Feng and slyly hinted that since he had risked his life for the people, maybe the government should show a little appreciation. When asked what he meant, Shen grinned and suggested that the empty Hong family mansion would make a perfect place for him to live and do business. Magistrate Feng immediately caught on and agreed to gift it to him on behalf of the county. Shen, delighted, threw his arm over Feng's shoulder and promised to write a charm for his house later, laughing happily at how things had turned out. While Shen Changqing and Magistrate Feng were happily talking, Li Chunfeng stood in the back, quietly thinking. He remembered how strange the Hong family mansion felt last time he visited. People said the Hong family was wiped out by the tiger demon, but there were already rumors of family members passing away one after another for years. That didn't add up. Maybe Master already suspected something was wrong with the place and asked about the mansion to keep others from moving in. Li clenched his fists. He had to go investigate. Soon after, at Ziku Mansion, Shen thanked Magistrate Feng warmly, even promising to invite him for drinks another day. Feng smiled and said he'd always be there to help. Then Shen turned to Dongli, wondering where Li Chunfeng had run off to. Dongli explained that he went to check out the Hong mansion. Shen just grinned, waved it off, and said to let him be. He then called the others over to help him test something out. Meanwhile, Li Chunfeng had already arrived at the Hong mansion. Standing in the courtyard, he immediately felt it, a heavy, eerie energy wrapping around the place. He muttered to himself that something was definitely wrong. After asking the nearby villagers, he learned the mansion was built right next to an ancient underground tomb. The Hong family had been guarding it for generations. Back when Master was around, he must have used his spiritual energy to suppress it, which is why Li didn't notice anything earlier. But now, the Yin energy was getting stronger, almost ready to take shape. That explained why members of the Hong family kept passing away early. Anyone living here would slowly have their life drained. As he was thinking, the compass on his chest suddenly lit up, glowing brighter and brighter. Li panicked. It was the mystic sky treasure mirror activating on its own. A golden flame-like aura surrounded him, and when he looked up, a huge red eye appeared in the sky, sucking in all the Yin energy. His heart sank. It was the Yin gathering formation of the Black Mountain Old Demon. That demon was using the underground tomb as the center of the formation, and the Hong mansion just happened to sit right on top of it. Li quickly calculated in his head, things were bad. Master had just finished off one of the demon's generals, and now the real danger was on its way. Back at Shen's small courtyard, things were much more cheerful. Man Shan had already been dealt with, and his hide was hanging on a tree, while the group prepared a big meal. Shen and Little Qing lit the fire, Dongli poured fresh wine into a steaming pot, and everyone laughed as they got ready to enjoy roast duck with fine wine. None of them noticed the black crow sitting on a branch, its glowing red eyes watching them closely. After a moment, the crow spread its wings and flew off, leaving behind a single feather. It flew all the way to a dark place, where an eerie figure caught it in his hand. This was the Black Mountain Old Demon himself, his body radiating dark energy. He sneered, muttering about the so-called immortal who had just taken down his subordinate, curious to see how powerful this newcomer really was. Back in Shen's courtyard, golden energy shimmered over the wine jar as water dripped into it. A strange power spread out, causing Dongli to give off an enchanting aura, while Little Qing's body reacted to the energy, making her shiver. Just by breathing in the scent of the wine, they could already feel an overwhelming rush of spiritual energy. Shen waved it off, saying the brew was decent but still not strong enough for his standards. The sisters teased him, asking if he could really make something even better. Meanwhile, outside, the Black Mountain Old Demon was still secretly observing. He frowned, puzzled. Shen looked like a normal man with no trace of magic, so how could Man Shan have been defeated by him? Just then, two young men happened to walk by, chatting loudly about Shen. One of them said Shen was an immortal, and even joked that old Zhao had bought a charm from him and now had the stamina of 10 men, making his wife call him a hero every night. The other laughed and said he wanted one too, so his own fierce wife would stop scolding him. As they were talking, the two suddenly spotted the old man. Thinking he was just another customer, they cheerfully told him there was no need to be shy, and that Shen was approachable, no need to climb the wall to sneak in. Hearing this, the Black Mountain Old Demon's face darkened, but he said nothing. Inside the courtyard, Shen was pouring wine when the two young men barged in, calling out happily that they'd come to buy charms. Shen's eyes lit up, saying he had plenty and asked what kind they wanted. One leaned close and whispered that they wanted the same type old Zhao had bought, praising how effective it was. Shen froze for a second, stunned. 10 times? When did my charms ever do that? He thought to himself. He realized old Zhao must have exaggerated, and if these two bought one and it didn't work, they'd surely come back upset. So Shen explained gently, saying the charms were useful, but not as over the top as the rumors claimed. He advised them to also exercise daily and even mentioned that certain natural remedies, like using parts from strong animals, could help, but he warned them not to push themselves too far. The young men just laughed, saying Shen was too modest. They even pointed outside, saying that everyone in Jingyang County believed in his charms, from kids to elders. They mentioned they'd just seen an old man about to climb the wall for one, but when they turned to point him out, he was gone. Suddenly, a crack of thunder lit up the sky. A voice boomed, asking if they were looking for that old man. The sisters looked up in shock. It wasn't just any elder, it was the Black Mountain Old Demon himself, finally revealing his true identity. The moment Shen looked up and saw the Black Mountain Old Demon standing on his roof with lightning flashing behind him and that creepy crow on his shoulder, he was furious. Instead of being scared, he shouted that his roof tiles had been damaged and demanded compensation. Down below, the townsfolk were frozen in fear. Dongli quickly whispered to her sister that no matter what, they had to protect the immortal master. One said she'd stay behind to hold the old demon off while the other took Shen back to the East Sea. But Shen just got angrier hearing this. He scolded the old man even louder, saying things like, "You're already this old and still climbing roofs? Don't think age gives you a free pass. If you break even one more tile, you'll pay for it." The Black Mountain Old Demon was actually stunned. From what he could see, Shen looked like a regular guy, not even as strong as the two sisters beside him. Yet here he was, completely unafraid and even threatening him. The old demon thought to himself that maybe it was best not to act rashly. Then he raised his voice, accusing Shen of finishing his subordinate demon king. Shen blinked in disbelief. He asked if the old man was talking about the tiger. He couldn't believe it. He laughed, saying the tiger was a reward from the magistrate, so if the old man wanted it back, he'd better pay up. And again, Shen told him to come down before he slipped and embarrassed himself in front of everyone watching. Dongli tried to warn Shen quietly, telling him this was no ordinary enemy, this was the Black Mountain Old Demon, a heavenly demon-level being. But instead of backing off, Shen doubled down. He cursed at the old demon, saying he was shameless, and swore he wouldn't let him leave, not even if the Jade Emperor himself came down to intervene. At that moment, Li Chunfeng rushed in, panicked, shouting for his master to be careful. He warned that a heavenly demon had enough power to destroy entire cities. The Black Mountain Old Demon floated above the courtyard, releasing his aura. Behind him appeared a terrifying Yiksha figure with 2 horns and 8 arms. Smirking, he threatened Shen with all kinds of horrible fates, clearly confident he had the upper hand. Then, with a flash, he dove straight down from the roof at lightning speed, his smile making everyone's skin crawl. The crowd screamed in terror, crying out that it was over, some begging Shen to be careful. Just as panic reached its peak, a thick cloud of smoke suddenly filled the courtyard. Everyone instinctively shielded their faces. When the smoke cleared, everyone was stunned. The Black Mountain Old Demon staggered out, his body wrecked and barely holding together, his face twisted in fury. He clenched his jaw so hard it looked like he was about to spit fire, his eyes burning with rage. Shen didn't even flinch when he saw the old demon struggling. He stepped forward, saying the old man didn't need to make such a big scene just to apologize, admitting his mistake was enough. Hearing that, the old demon stumbled back, falling to his knees, shocked to find his strength slipping away. From the side, Little Qin, Dongli, and Li Chunfeng were stunned. Their jaws dropped as they whispered how incredible Shen was. If even the Black Mountain Old Demon had to kneel, then the immortal master must truly be unstoppable. Shen walked right up to the old demon, holding a manual in his hand. He teased him, saying he had warned him not to climb up on rooftops, but he didn't listen, and now look at the mess. The old demon's face twisted with frustration. Furious, he lunged forward with strange hands, shouting that he'd finish Shen for sure. But Shen just grabbed him with ease, calm as ever, and even went down on one knee to offer him the manual. He said it was a gift, free of charge, out of respect for the elderly, so no need to worry about fixing the roof anymore. When the old demon opened the scroll, instead of a fearsome spell, there was just one giant glowing word, embroidery. That golden light shot straight into his eyes, making him scream. A stream of golden energy flowed through him, and suddenly he coughed out sweet sugar water before collapsing to the ground. Shen jumped back, panicked, insisting he hadn't even touched the guy. He begged everyone to be witnesses, worrying that if the old demon passed out in his home, his family might come looking for trouble. Just then, the townsfolk rushed in. They scolded the old man for snatching characters that were meant for them, calling him shameless for trying to cut in line despite his age. Shen quickly tried to calm them down, reminding everyone to respect their elders and share fairly. He even praised the tradition of Jingyang County for always respecting the old and cherishing the young. At that moment, the little fox spirit marched up and told the Black Mountain Old Demon he clearly didn't know where he was. Even a heavenly demon couldn't just cause chaos in the immortal master's mansion. The old demon, drenched in sweat, stared at Shen in disbelief, wondering if he really was some hidden immortal. The little fox spirit bowed with respect, saying Shen's true power was beyond anything a mortal could understand. She mocked the old demon, pointing out he was now weaker than even a 3-year-old child. And just as she said that, a toddler waddled over, pulled down his pants, and peed right on the old demon's face before scampering away. The old demon's face turned bright red. He shouted furiously, swearing he was the great Black Mountain Immortal, a ruler that even other great demon lords respected. Being humiliated by a tiny child was too much for him, and he roared in anger, vowing to make Jingyang County pay for this shame. Just then, the Black Crow's red eyes flashed and locked onto Dongli. When she looked back, her pupils reflected the bird, and strange ripples appeared, like she was being hypnotized. In no time, her eyes turned red, and she collapsed. Little Qin panicked, realizing it was the soul capture technique. The Black Mountain Old Demon laughed coldly. Even though his powers were sealed, he bragged that he still had tricks left. He threatened Shen, saying he only had 2 choices, either let him take Dongli as repayment, or risk a battle that could drag all of Jingyang County into chaos. Shen was furious. He snapped at the old man, saying he was crazy and that if it was just about the tiger skin, he could have asked nicely, no need to drag innocent people into this. But Black Mountain just stared at Dongli with a nasty grin, making Shen so angry that smoke practically shot from his nose. He rolled up his sleeves, ready to throw down. Before Shen could act, though, a huge shadow appeared behind the old demon. A voice boomed out, calling calling him a shameless pervert for daring to have bad intentions toward Dong Li. A tall young man with glowing red eyes suddenly rushed forward, grabbed Black Mountain by the head, and punched him so hard he smashed into a wall. The young man shouted for him to get lost. Everyone froze in shock. Shen, stunned but proud, muttered something about how this was truly worthy of being his son. The young man then turned to Dong Li, gently helping her up, reassuring her that she was safe now and the creep had been driven away. But before the moment could sink in, little Qing dashed over, snatched her sister from the young man's arms, and fussed over her in a panic, asking what had just happened and if she was okay. Meanwhile, Li Chunfeng and Shen walked toward where the old demon had fallen. Chuanfeng's eyes went wide, whispering that maybe the Black Mountain old demon was finished for good, praising Shen as a hero for saving the people. Shen nearly choked when he heard that. He hurriedly pulled Chunfeng aside, warning him not to talk nonsense unless he wanted them all in trouble. He swore he hadn't finished the guy and begged Chunfeng to keep quiet when the officials showed up. Still nervous, Shen grabbed a tree branch and poked the old demon's face, muttering about maybe finding a doctor. But just then, his own face turned pale, his nose scrunched up, and he groaned in despair, muttering that this time, things were really bad. A few hours later, the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky orange. Magistrate Feng showed up with two of his men, smiling wide as he saluted Shen Changqing. He said something about how Shen had once again done a great job for Jingyang County. Apparently, that Black Mountain old demon was a big deal, one of the top 20 troublemakers on the Empire's most wanted list. Now that Shen had taken care of him, it was a huge win for everyone. The magistrate also reassured Shen that he knew how things worked with cultivators. These kinds of supernatural matters weren't meant for common folks to know. Then, as usual, he pinned a red flower on Shen's chest as a sign of honor. But this time, Shen looked a bit confused, wondering why he was wearing the same red flower twice in one day. Seeing his puzzled face, Magistrate Feng laughed and explained that the Empire would officially report this case as if Shen had taken down a wanted bandit instead of anything supernatural. That way, people wouldn't panic. After finishing his speech, the magistrate hopped into his sedan chair, waved goodbye, and left with his men. As soon as they were gone, Shen sighed, pulled the red flower off his chest, and shook his head. He couldn't believe he had to go through all that ceremony twice in one day. Meanwhile, in the village, a strong young guy was busy spreading his own version of the story. He told everyone that the old man Shen had defeated was actually the Black Mountain old demon himself. He claimed his uncle's cousin's friend who worked at the county office confirmed it. He even said that the government story about some underworld tyrant was just a cover-up to fool common folks. The young man asked a kid named Ergozi to back him up, and the boy nodded, saying he'd seen everything. How that strange old man demanded Shen to hand over Miss Dongli as compensation. Hearing this, the villagers gasped in shock. The muscular guy continued, bragging that he had thought the old man was just being creepy toward Miss Dongli, so he stepped in and gave him a good smack, which somehow finished him off. As he spoke, his legs trembled just remembering it. One villager rolled his eyes and told him not to be ridiculous. He said everyone saw how a flash of divine light from Shen had made that old demon collapse. If it weren't for the immortal master's powers, none of them would even be standing there. The others nodded, agreeing that it really felt like they'd witnessed a clash between two great cultivators. Some even said they thought they saw Shen's spirit rise up to fight in the sky. Later that evening, a bunch of kids surrounded Shen, firing off questions like a rapid-fire quiz, asking if he ate candy, if immortals used the bathroom, and if he was married. Shen got more and more annoyed, eventually telling them to scram when one of them teased that no immortal lady probably liked him anyway. In another corner of the courtyard, the Dong sisters were busy brewing wine. Dong Li reminded her sister to control the fire properly, and when the wine was ready, they hurried to find a jar to store it. From the other side of the courtyard, Shen shouted, insisting again that he really wasn't an immortal. Later that night, the scene shifted to the Ziku Mansion courtyard. Shen and Li Chunfeng stood facing each other, both looking serious. Shen asked if Li really had to leave, but Li insisted he must. His mission was to bring back the remains of the Black Mountain old demon to their sect. Shen frowned and asked him to think it over, but Li stayed firm. Finally, Shen spat to the side and muttered something like, "Ugh, you stubborn man." Right then, the little fox spirit saw the spit glow with spiritual energy and excitedly ran over to lick it. Shen immediately grabbed a coconut shell and tapped its head, warning it not to even think about it or he'd toss it out of the courtyard. After some time, Li Chunfeng came forward, bowed respectfully, and said he'd be back soon. Shen handed him a wine gourd and a box of pastries for the road, complaining that even the roast duck shop staff had all quit, leaving him to handle things alone. Li accepted the gifts curiously and asked what they were. Shen waved him off, saying it was just some snacks and homemade wine, then told him to be safe and head out early. He turned away, saying he was going to bed. When Li opened the box, a golden glow shone out. The pastries were filled with powerful spiritual energy, enough to leave him completely stunned. Li Chunfeng stared at the glowing buns inside the pastry box, completely shocked. He muttered in in disbelief, wondering if these were divine treasures. Without thinking twice, he grabbed one and stuffed it into his mouth. The moment the bun went down, waves of powerful energy rushed through his whole body. His eyes lit up with golden light as his body started to absorb the spiritual energy like a sponge. A huge beam of golden light suddenly shot up into the sky from where he stood, and he couldn't help but shout in excitement. He had broken through to a new level of cultivation. Overwhelmed, Li Chunfeng dropped to his knees, tears in his eyes, feeling deeply thankful to his master. He promised that he would never forget this kindness and said that once he returned to the sect, he would tell everyone about Shen Changqing's greatness so his master could be rewarded. Before he could finish, a book suddenly flew across the courtyard and smacked him right in the face. Startled, he fell backward as Shen Changqing stormed out of his room, eyes blazing. Shen yelled at him, saying he better not go around telling people about him or there would be serious consequences. He added that if Li Chunfeng dared to mention his name, their master-disciple bond would be over for good. After warning him, Shen slammed his door shut, still shouting from inside for Li Chunfeng to get lost and stop disturbing his sleep. Li sat there, dizzy and confused, rubbing his head. He looked down and noticed the book that had hit him. It was titled The 99 Multiplication Oral Formula. He stared at it for a moment, and a small smile crept onto his face. In his heart, he thought this must be a hidden immortal technique disguised as a simple book. Even though his master had a sharp tongue, his heart was warm and caring. Li Chunfeng promised himself that he would work hard and live up to his master's expectations. A while later, in another part of the village, Shen Changqing could be seen driving a horse cart filled with luggage. Someone asked if they were really moving into the Hong family's old mansion. Shen grinned and said yes. Magistrate Feng had officially given him that property. He added that the old house was too cramped anyway, and now he planned to start a roast duck and wine business to make some serious money. Hearing that, Dong Li's eyes widened. She reminded him that even though the curse on the Hong mansion was gone after the Black Mountain incident, most villagers still thought the place was unlucky and avoided it. Shen just smiled and said nothing. When they finally arrived at the gates of the Hong mansion, the two stood in silence, looking up at the grand building. Dong Li hesitated and said the place seemed too far from the main market, not really ideal for business. Shen nodded thoughtfully and said they might need to use their ultimate move. As he turned toward her, their eyes accidentally met. Both of them froze for a moment, cheeks turning red. Dong Li quickly looked away, stepping back shyly, thinking to herself how unexpectedly nice Shen's scent was. Just then, little Qing woke up, yawning and asking sleepily if they had arrived. Shen climbed down from the cart, trying to hide his flustered expression, and said with a grin that their killer move was simply to host a big grand opening event. He explained his plan. They'd set up a big stage, invite opera troupes to perform, and have monks and Taoist priests come to chant and bless the place. That way, everyone would know the mansion was safe and free of any bad energy. With a confident smile, Shen declared that 10 Mile Village was now the cleanest and most peaceful place in the entire Tang Empire. Little Qing's eyes sparkled with curiosity as she asked if the immortal master was also going to perform magic at the event. Shen Changqing scratched his head, looking a little awkward, and said that yeah, you could kind of call it magic, but immediately frowned and warned everyone not to use that word in public. He said if people heard the word magic, they'd be too scared to come near the place. Then he pulled out a stack of colorful flyers and handed them to Dong Li and her sister. He told them to paste them all over the village, especially near the entrances. He reminded them to be careful. If any officials showed up, they should run right away and not get caught. After that, he smiled and said he'd go clean up the new house and make some roast duck for dinner if they got back before dark. The sisters took the flyers and started their little mission, walking through the streets and posting them everywhere. On the way, little Qing curiously asked if Shen had made them do this just to promote his new roast duck and wine shop. Dong Li took out one flyer to check and was instantly stunned. The paper itself was glowing faintly and giving off strong spiritual energy. She frowned, saying something felt off. For just ordinary advertising, there was no reason to use papers filled with spiritual power. As she held it longer, the energy started flowing into her body, making her close her eyes and focus. After a moment, she realized even 2 sheets were powerful enough to help with cultivation. She told her sister these weren't normal papers, they were divine artifacts. Shen must have had a hidden purpose, one that was far beyond their understanding. By the time they were done posting everything, the sun was almost gone, and the sky glowed orange over Jingyang County. The sisters stood behind the crowd, tired but satisfied, wiping sweat from their foreheads as villagers gathered around the flyers to read them. People were chatting excitedly. Some said the immortal master was going to perform another big spiritual display. Others argued it was just a grand opening event for his shop. But everyone agreed on one thing. With Shen Changqing watching over 10 Mile Village, they all finally felt safe walking around again. Just then, something strange happened. A beam of spiritual light shot down from the sky onto one of the flyers, then another, and another. Dong Li and Little Qing stared at the glowing spots, their eyes widening as they realized what was happening. These flyers were forming a huge spiritual array. The energy from each one connected in the air, creating an enormous glowing pattern shaped like the 8 trigrams. The formation covered the entire county like a shining dome. People shouted in awe, saying that Jingyang County was about to become a sacred land for cultivation. But far below the ground, deep inside an ancient tomb beneath 10 Mile Village, something else was stirring. The leftover dark energy around an old coffin began to move. That energy gathered and formed the shape of a spirit, circling the coffin before diving in. Moments later, the coffin lid cracked open, releasing waves of eerie mist. From inside, a woman in red slowly rose, surrounded by heavy dark energy. She laughed loudly, realizing she had come back to life. Apparently, the Black Mountain Old Demon had used this place to gather energy for cultivation, but now all that power had ended up in her hands instead. She looked at her hands, smiling to herself. After absorbing that energy for 100 years, she had become something truly dangerous. She muttered that with one more step, by consuming human energy, she could surpass her limits and even high-level immortals wouldn't be able to stop her. As the night deepened, that same dark energy began to spread quietly, creeping toward Shen Chongqing's new mansion at 10 Mile Village. Inside the house, Shen Chongqing is sleeping peacefully, so relaxed that he's even using the little fox spirit as a makeshift sleep mask. Nearby, the sisters Dong Li and Little Qing are lying on the bed with flushed faces, clearly tipsy. They giggle and mumble something about still being able to drink more of the immortal master's wine and how good it tastes. Just then, the old demon woman appears. Her eyes are full of dark intent, and she gives a twisted smile while running her tongue over her nails. She mutters something like, "You caused me so much trouble last time, but now that I have this corpse, even someone as strong as you can't do anything to me." Meanwhile, far away at the city god temple in Jingyang County, 3 figures are having a discussion: the city god himself, the martial judge, and a blue-robed civil judge. The city god lounges comfortably in his chair as they talk about Shen Chongqing. The 2 judges seem amazed that such a young Taoist master could have powers that deep. They say that if Shen could stay in Jingyang County permanently, the place would never have to worry about spirits or strange events again. The city god smiles and agrees. He mentions how Shen not only got rid of the Ghost King from Ziku Mansion but also dealt with the Black Mountain Old Demon like it was nothing. Impressed, he decides that they should visit him the next day and make a good impression. But as soon as he finishes speaking, his expression suddenly changes. He feels something, an eerie energy spreading through the air. This aura, what's going on, he wonders. The martial judge quickly says that Shen moved to the Hong family's old house in 10 Mile Village earlier that day. The city god's face turns serious. He can sense that the energy coming from there is much stronger than anything they've dealt with before, far beyond the Ghost King's level. He says they need to hurry. It feels like something huge is happening in 10 Mile Village. The civil judge looks nervous and says that if even Shen might be in trouble, then they might not stand a chance either. The city god gives him a firm look and reminds him that their duty is to protect the people, even if it means putting themselves at risk. The civil judge lowers his head and apologizes for hesitating. Then the city god calculates with his fingers, trying to sense what's happening. He mutters that if something bad happens to Shen Chongqing, it'll cause big problems, maybe even bring pressure from Shen's powerful disciples later. He decides that they can't just wait, they must go and see for themselves. If Shen can't handle it, they'll step in to save him. But dealing with the source of the evil energy might need help from the Imperial Astronomical Bureau later. With that, the city god and the 2 judges focus their spiritual energy and soar through the night toward 10 Mile Village. A few moments later, they arrive outside Shen Chongqing's place, only to find the main gate smashed open and dark energy pouring out like thick smoke. The city god's eyes widen, and he instantly rushes forward with the others, shouting that things don't look good and that Shen Chongqing might be in serious danger. As soon as the city god and his 2 assistants rush into Shen Chongqing's house, the city god immediately senses something strange. He frowns, raises his hand, and shouts for the evil energy to retreat, but before he can even finish, his eyes land on something so shocking that he freezes on the spot. The next second, he slips backward in panic, bumping right into the martial judge, who in turn crashes into the civil judge. All 3 of them tumble in a messy chain reaction. Hearing the commotion, Shen Chongqing wakes up and rubs his eyes, wondering what all the noise is about. He looks toward the door, completely unaware that the female ghost, who had been pretending to be drunk earlier, is lying right on top of him. The city god and his men see this scene and instantly turn red with embarrassment. None of them can find the right words. In a hurry, they slam the door shut and shout awkwardly that they're sorry for interrupting him and will come back to apologize another day. Still half asleep, Shen Chongqing sits up and yawns. He mutters to himself, confused, wondering why those people barged in at night acting like they saw something scary, and what spring night they were even talking about. But as soon as he repeats their words in his head, he freezes and goes pale. Wait, saw a ghost? That phrase hits him like lightning. He quickly sits up and scans the room, but everything looks normal. After a long pause, he lets out a sigh, lies back down, and hugs the little fox spirit like a pillow. With a tired smile, he grumbles that someone's really good at pretending to be spooky and that even he got tricked for a second. Then, half-jokingly, he warns that if it happens again, he'll show them what true justice looks like. Under the bed, the female ghost is lying flat on her stomach, her face pale green and filled with disbelief. Just being close to Shin makes her spiritual energy drain away. She can feel it, even though she's stronger than ever and confident she could face a true immortal. Something about Shin Changqing completely overwhelms her. Trembling, she decides she needs to get as far away from him as possible and slowly crawls toward the door. Up on the roof, the city god and the two judges are still peeking down, completely misunderstanding what they saw. Their faces are bright red as they whisper to each other in awe, saying that Shin Changqing is truly powerful, able to subdue even a ghost in such an unbelievable way. They call it a perfect display of divine skill. Meanwhile, the female ghost weakly stumbles out the door, exhausted and pale. She lifts her head and spots the three peeping officials on the roof. All three panic instantly, use their spiritual power, and zoom away at lightning speed, shouting that they didn't see anything and it's none of their business. The ghost glares after them, her face dark with frustration, too angry to even speak. Later, the city god and his team finally return to the temple, still out of breath. A group of curious followers rushes over to ask how it went. The martial judge, still dazed, blurts out that he's never seen anything like it before, that the Taoist master's methods are beyond imagination, absolutely world-shaking. Everyone around is shocked, especially a young general named Gan Lu. His eyes widen, and he demands to know what kind of divine technique Shin used to finish off the spirit. The city god starts explaining how they went there to assist Shin, but before he can finish, the martial judge interrupts excitedly, about to describe what they saw at the doorway, the part that left them all speechless. As the city god finishes his part of the story, the civil judge can't help but interrupt. He waves his hand and adds excitedly that he clearly saw the female ghost clinging to Shin Changqing, acting all soft and flirty, moving around like she was trying to charm him. Hearing this, everyone's faces turn red, and they can't help but laugh awkwardly. The civil judge sighs dramatically, saying that the whole scene was just too much, so intense it almost made his eyes burn. The crowd leans in, eager for more, and someone quickly asks what happened next. The civil judge smiles proudly and says that Shin Changqing eventually made them leave, but they were worried he might not be able to handle the ghost, so they stayed nearby to watch just in case. Then he pauses, teasing everyone by saying the best part is still coming. Before he can continue, the martial judge jumps in, shoving him aside. He explains that after a short while, about the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the female ghost came stumbling out of the house looking completely drained. She even closed the door gently behind her, like she didn't want to disturb Shin. Her energy, he says, was almost completely gone. The people listening gasp in amazement. Their eyes sparkle as they whisper to each other that this was incredible, truly worthy of Shin Changqing's reputation as a master. One of them, though, can't help but raise a silly question. He nervously asks if maybe Shin could only keep up that level of control for just a short time, like the length of a small cup of tea. The moment those words leave his mouth, the entire group glares at him. The air gets tense, and before he can react, someone kicks him in the face and scolds him for daring to doubt their idol. The others join in, shouting things like, "That's not because he got tired, that was mercy. He spared her," and "How could that ghost even handle more of his power?" They rush at the poor guy, shouting that Shin Changqing is their hero and anyone who mocks him deserves a lesson. The young man cries out, begging them to stop, saying he was wrong, but they keep scolding him for talking nonsense about their master. Meanwhile, back at Shin Changqing's house, the dark energy outside keeps thickening, swirling together like a storm cloud. The vengeful ghost appears again, her face twisted with anger. She laughs coldly to herself, saying that this place is perfect for gathering energy and that her power is about to reach its peak. Determined, she decides to try again. If she can't defeat the man inside, at least she'll scare him away. But just as she's about to make her move, the door creaks open. Shin Changqing steps out, yawning and stretching, looking half asleep. He scratches his waist lazily, clearly just heading outside for, well, a quick bathroom break. The ghost freezes in terror. Her body tenses, cold sweat running down her back. She quickly hides behind a big tree, whispering to herself in panic, wondering why he came out now of all times. Shen, completely unaware of her presence, looks around sleepily for a spot and mutters that the big tree in front of him will do just fine. To him, ghosts are invisible. He doesn't even know she's there. So he slowly walks toward the tree, loosening his belt as he goes. The ghost watches, horrified, thinking he might have noticed her. Shen stands right in front of her, adjusts his stance, and the ghost clutches her nose, trembling, asking what he's about to do. The next moment, Shen calmly releases a stream of glowing, golden energy, pure spiritual essence. The ghost lets out a terrified cry, realizing too late that she's right in the middle of it. Within seconds, the negative energy around her begins to dissolve. The ghost's form weakens and fades until she completely disappears, her energy purified and scattered into harmless light. Shen Changqing suddenly hears a strange sound outside and jumps a little, calling out nervously to ask who's there. After a moment of silence, he calms down, adjusts his belt, and glances at the puddle near his feet, muttering that all this noise in the middle of the night nearly scared him half to death. Still half asleep, he sighs and decides to head back to bed, grumbling that once he gets rich, he's definitely putting a toilet inside his room. Meanwhile, somewhere else in Jingyang County, a couple is still awake in a softly lit room. The wife suddenly freezes and whispers that she heard a noise, maybe a ghost. Her husband nervously agrees but says it's probably Taoist Master Shen dealing with some spirit again, so they shouldn't worry. The wife tells him to relax and continue what they were doing, but when the cabinet creaks, the husband stiffens up, saying he can't focus anymore. His wife rolls her eyes and scolds him for being so scared over a tiny sound. Outside, a single young man walking past overhears their conversation, his eyes welling up as he mutters sadly about his lonely fate. Back at Shen Changqing's house, he's already fast asleep again, hugging the little fox spirit like a pillow, drool dripping from his mouth as he sleep talks about being rich and swimming in money. The next morning, the entire village is buzzing with excitement. A lively lion dance is being performed right in front of Shen's roast duck shop to celebrate its grand opening. The villagers cheer loudly, clapping and shouting "bravo" and "amazing" over and over. Everyone's excited, saying that Taoist Master Shen truly is incredible. Not only did he deal with spirits, but now his roast duck shop ads are plastered all over the city. Some even joke that if anyone else had done that, they'd have been caught by the authorities, but Shen? He can get away with anything. Magistrate Feng is also among the crowd, watching with a satisfied smile. A nervous young officer beside him whispers that with so many people gathered, things might get out of control, and maybe they should send soldiers to maintain order. Before he can finish, Magistrate Feng gives him a light slap on the head and scolds him for talking nonsense. He reminds the man that this is Immortal Master Shen they're talking about, the most respected person in Jingyang County. He proudly says that meeting Shen is like meeting a real celebrity, and today they'll just stand and watch how the Immortal Master works his magic. The young officer quickly nods, saying he understands. On stage, Shen Changqing waves warmly to the crowd. The moment people see him, they start shouting his name and cheering wildly. Some even call out playfully, saying they love him or asking him to catch them instead of ghosts. Standing there under the bright sun, Shen smiles confidently. He can't believe his mystical reputation has turned out to be so profitable. Just look at all these people. He can already imagine his roast duck business booming overnight and the money rolling in. With that thought, he clears his throat and begins his speech. He tells the crowd that today isn't just the grand opening of Shen's roast duck shop, it's also the day he completely clears away all the negative energy from 10 Mile Village. He points behind him to the old Hong family mansion and explains that the place has long been rumored to be haunted, with many strange events over the years. The villagers immediately start talking among themselves, agreeing that he's right. Some say they used to live near that house and always heard odd noises. Others nod, saying everyone in 10 Mile Village knows the Hong family story. That place had weird happenings every few days, and in the end, no one from that family made it out safely. Shen Changqing steps onto the stage, pats his chest, and says confidently that since he's moved into this house, he'll prove there's nothing to fear about ghosts. Then, with a flourish, he pulls out what he calls his magical treasure, an iPhone 15. He proudly holds it up, saying this very phone once helped him seal a spirit in another haunted house before. The crowd goes wild. People start whispering and shouting excitedly, saying they remember seeing him handle that incident before and calling the phone a divine tool. Seeing everyone hyped up, Shen grins to himself, thinking the timing couldn't be better. He just needs his phone to cooperate now. He presses the power button, and thankfully, the screen lights up, though it immediately flashes a low battery warning. Still, he's relieved it works at all. With a polite smile, he tells the crowd to wait a moment and dashes back into the house. Inside, the two sisters, Dong Li and Little Qing, are quietly munching on roast duck while watching through the window. They whisper to each other, wondering if this place really has ghosts. They've been staying here for days and haven't sensed anything strange. One of them jokes that maybe their spiritual strength is too weak, and the other adds that perhaps the ghost here is even more powerful than the one from the Ziku mansion. They agree it's better to follow the Immortal Master's orders and stay inside. Meanwhile, Shen Changqing rushes back outside, holding the glowing phone like a sacred tool. He takes a deep breath and loudly declares that he's about to use his ultimate move, the 24-character socialist values. Then, he starts chanting the words on his phone screen, things like prosperity, harmony, justice, and friendship. Right after he finishes, the sky rumbles. A sudden flash of light streaks across the clouds. The crowd gasps in shock and excitement, shouting that there's thunder in broad daylight and that the immortal master has summoned heavenly lightning to wipe out evil. Shin stands there smiling calmly, though inside he's secretly proud of how perfectly the timing worked. The sound from his phone, a mix of thunder and eerie wailing noises, echoes around, making the whole act feel even more real. Once the crowd has seen enough, Shin raises his hand proudly and announces that the ghost has been completely taken care of and 10 Mile Village will finally have peace. The villagers cheer, but then one curious old farmer raises his hand and nervously asks if they can actually see the ghost Shin just defeated. Shin Changqing frowned for a moment when someone asked to see the ghost, realizing the crowd was harder to impress than he thought. He quickly raised his phone and told everyone to watch closely. The crowd leaned in, buzzing with excitement, eager to see some miracle. Taking a deep breath, Shin called out to Siri, and the phone immediately responded. The young people in the crowd cheered loudly, some even gasping in amazement. One of the officials watching couldn't believe his eyes, muttering that Shin's methods were truly godlike. People started comparing this to Shin's past feats, like handling the Black Mountain Old Demon and the Fox Spirit. A woman nearby thanked him, saying 10 Mile Village would finally be safe, and then playfully scolded her husband for being so scared the night before. Shin smiled at the phone and explained that the ghosts had been around for a long time and that the villagers had all been affected by lingering Yin energy. He promised that eating his roast duck, cooked with pure yang fire, could cleanse it in less than a day. He admitted, though, that he could only roast 10 ducks a day without exhausting his energy, so everyone needed to be patient. The crowd immediately went wild, rushing forward with money, shouting how much they were willing to pay. People were shoving and pushing to get their ducks, some even falling over. Magistrate Feng almost got knocked down, but one of his subordinates shielded him, telling him not to worry. Shin quickly intervened, suggesting a lottery system to keep things fair, while the crowd grumbled and bickered over the line. Meanwhile, elsewhere that night, a little boy playing in a courtyard accidentally fell into a well after someone pushed him. Servants carrying lanterns ran over, shouting for help, panicking to save the boy. Back at Shin's house, Shin was guiding Dongli, making sure she was ready for her first task as the manager of Shin's roast duck. He reassured her he wouldn't mistreat her, and once she agreed, he lit fireworks in celebration. He even excitedly talked about expanding the business to Chang'an within a year and across the country in 2. Just then, little Qing rushed in, telling Shin someone was looking for him outside. Both Shen and Dongli were surprised at first, but Shin calmly explained it wasn't unusual. With his growing fame in Jingyang County, people often came to him for talismans and help with spirits. This was just another normal day for him. Outside Shin Changqing's door, a middle-aged man named Sun Rong arrived with 2 assistants. He bowed politely, looking a bit anxious, and introduced himself, asking for Shen's help. Shen, smiling, teased whether he was here for a talisman or to buy some roast duck. Sun Rong quickly explained that his son had recently passed away and he wanted Shen to pick a good day to set up an altar and perform rituals to help his son's soul. Shen's face darkened for a moment. He wasn't really into setting up altars, thinking it was a bit out of his usual style. But Sun Rong, sensing Shen's hesitation, quickly offered a token of sincerity. A subordinate opened a small wooden box, and sunlight caught the contents, 200 taels of silver as a deposit, with 500 more promised after the ritual. Shen's eyes lit up. This was easier than he expected. Switching to a serious tone, Shen told Sun Rong he didn't need to give gifts. His work was for the safety of the people, and helping came from his heart. Still, he accepted the box, patting Sun Rong on the shoulder and promising to come the next day to help set up the altar. Sun Rong, relieved, hurried off in his carriage, trusting Shen completely. Once alone, Shen couldn't hide his excitement. He opened the box and laughed, delighted at the gold, joking that this was easier than robbing a bank. He danced around in the courtyard, imagining all the things he could buy with the money. Meanwhile, back at the city god temple, the civil judge smiled as he recorded Shen's feats in the ledger, praising his abilities. The city god, leaning back, admitted that while Shen was powerful at exorcising ghosts, the Imperial Astronomical Bureau still held greater expertise in broader matters like fate and destiny. The martial judge whispered a warning about Shen's pride, advising caution in case Shen overheard and caused trouble. Just then, Shen appeared outside, performing a comical chicken dance in full view of the city god. The city god fell backward in shock, and Shen quickly froze, realizing the awkwardness. Trying to save face, he waved and put on a confident smile, joking about legends of thieves hiding in abandoned temples. Shen Changqing stepped forward, giving a slight bow toward the bearded man and guessing he must be the martial judge. Then, he sidled up and whispered an apology, saying he hadn't meant to cause trouble and that he understood how people sometimes had to bend the rules to make a living. From the side, one of the city god's subordinates whispered nervously, wondering if Shen had come to investigate them for meddling in his ghost business the night before. Another noted that Shen didn't seem like someone to be easily fooled fueled or angered. The city god, sweating nervously behind the door, reminded everyone to be careful with their words. Moments later, the city god stepped out smiling. Shen clasped his hands politely and apologized for the midnight incident, pretending he hadn't realized who they all were. He guessed the others' identities, nodding to the honorable judge and General Gan Lu, while secretly thinking the whole setup felt like a professional scam. The city god responded cheerfully, asking what brought Shen there this time, secretly impressed that Shen's magical power might even surpass the divine power of the city god temple. Standing there, Shen recalled the angry look on a subordinate's face and thought he might have walked straight into a trap. He joked to himself about possibly getting into a sticky situation, even imagining he might shed some blood, and pretended to tear up, calling the officials talented and saying he came for industry exchange. The city god, blushing and sweating, panicked a little, wondering if Shen was actually there to cause trouble. After some discussion, the city god finally explained the funeral ritual procedure to Shen. He described using a simple ceremony with hand seals and chanting to guide the soul, inviting the deity, reading the plea, and then ascending the platform to perform the ritual. He even showed Shen the hand seals and mantras for review. Shen responded politely, praising the explanation and the effort put into preparing everything. Shen Changqing quickly recorded the whole process, grabbed a basket of ritual tools, and left in a cheerful mood. Behind him, the city gods group slumped onto the ground, completely exhausted and drenched in sweat. They muttered to themselves that this so-called industry exchange felt more like being teased all day. Some complained that Shen was an immortal anyway. Why would someone like him need tips from ordinary spirits about how to set up altars? The martial judge gave the city god a sideways look and said it was probably because the city god had been too rash before, and now Shen was paying them back. The city god got annoyed and told everyone to stop whining. Floating up into the air with spiritual power, he explained that Taoist master Shen wasn't mocking them at all, he was actually training them. As he spoke, golden spiritual energy flowed into him, making him feel stronger than before. Outside the temple, more energy shot upward as loud voices shouted about breakthroughs and new realms. Realizing how narrow-minded they'd been, everyone started praising Shen as a true immortal. Meanwhile, Shen, standing outside with his ears covered, frowned at their shouting. To him, he had just borrowed some props to do a ritual, not done anything worth all this noise. The next morning at the Sun Mansion in Jingyang County, the atmosphere was heavy with mourning. Outside, preparations for the funeral were underway. People in mourning clothes surrounded a coffin, and a woman silently burned spirit money. Old Sun Rong led Shen to the altar, while Shen quietly noted how wealthy the family was but also how sad it was that an elder had to bury someone young. Then something caught Shen's attention. He turned to Sun Rong and asked to see the well. The woman kept burning paper money with a blank face as Sun Rong led Shen to the back. From the well rose a thick, dark energy. Shen asked if the well had been connected to the young master's passing. Sun Rong began to explain. That night, after the servants finished working and everyone had gone to rest, his son Fu Gue had gone out to play on his own. Fu Gue had been born with special needs and lost his mother early, while Sun Rong was always busy with business. He said he had hoped for years his son's condition would improve but felt he had failed both him and his late wife. As he spoke, his body trembled and tears streamed down his face. He recalled how, when they pulled Fu Gue from the well, the boy was still moving, covered in dirt and bruises, holding tight to the rattle drum his father gave him and calling for his father. Sun Rong broke down, saying he couldn't forgive himself. Shen gently told him to stay strong. Lowering his head, he promised he would do his best. Just then, a rustling came from his basket. When Shen opened it, a small fox spirit popped out, surprising him. He scolded it softly, telling it to stay put and not wander around. Shen Changqing took a talisman from his basket and told Master Sun not to grieve too much. He explained that the dead can't return, but he would read a passage from the Tai Shang Jiu Ku Jing for the young master, hoping it would ease his karmic suffering in this life and bring him a happier next life. The little fox spirit watched eagerly, eyes sparkling, thrilled to see the immortal master perform rituals up close. Suddenly, it noticed something crawling out of the well, a remnant soul of a beautiful woman with a sad expression. The fox spirit froze, surprised and sweating, wondering where this wandering soul had come from and why it appeared in broad daylight. The soul floated in front of Shen Changqing, clasping hands as if listening to the sutra. The little fox spirit was confused, realizing the young master was already guided but this woman's soul had lingered. Meanwhile, in 10 Mile Village, little Qing was walking through the courtyard carrying 2 ducks when a beam of spiritual energy descended from the sky. Startled, she shouted, only to discover it was the city god, who wanted to meet Shen Changqing. Little Qing explained that Shen had already left for Jingyang County to perform a ritual, and the city god quietly flew away, thanking her before disappearing. Little Qing muttered about their audacity, wishing Shen had been home to deal with them. Dong Li called from the kitchen, reminding her to bring the ducks in. Back at the city god temple, the city god pondered the situation, counting on his fingers and holding a book. He realized Shen had gone to perform rituals for the Sun family's young master, but a ghost in the Sun family's old house had lingered for over a decade. It might be a wronged soul, he thought, puzzled. That evening at the Sun Mansion, a man approached Shen Changqing to let him know the ritual altar had been set up as requested and offered to assist if needed. Shen thanked him, then ran through the mansion, grumbling about how confusing it was even to find the bathroom in such a big, rich house. Arriving at the mourning hall, he was surprised to see a second coffin that hadn't been there earlier. Wondering who else the Sun family was mourning, he realized it might cost extra and groaned. Suddenly remembering he still needed the bathroom, he jumped up, exclaiming he couldn't hold it any longer and had to find it fast. After taking care of his needs, Shen Changqing decided to stretch his legs and wandered around the mansion. On the same path, he noticed a stunningly beautiful woman with a slim figure. His eyes widened, and he couldn't help but move closer for a better look. When he called out to her, she panicked and ran, leaving Shen Changqing pale and confused, trying to explain he just wanted to ask where the bathroom was. Later that night, as he returned to his bedroom, a dark figure appeared, calling his name. Shen groggily woke up to see the city god smiling at him. Without thinking, Shen gave him a punch that sent him flying, leaving his face comically deformed. Shen then made the city god kneel and demanded to know why he kept barging into rooms at odd hours. The city god explained he had gone to 10 Mile Village in the morning, learned that Shen had left for a ritual in Jingyang County, and noticed something unusual about the Sun family, so he came to warn him. Shen closed his eyes and muttered that a death obviously wasn't normal and suspected the city god was trying to compete for influence. Calmly, he told the city god there was nothing more to discuss and returned to sleep. The city god, realizing Shen probably already knew about the lingering wronged soul in the mansion, decided not to bother him further, offering the temple's assistance if needed. Shen's expression immediately turned dark, and he realized the city god had been slyly trying to get involved in the situation. In a flash, he kicked the city god out of the room, adding another blow for good measure, making it clear that this was not a matter for anyone else to meddle in. The city god, sensing the pitch-black, ominous energy emanating from the Sun Mansion, realized the lingering soul there must be extremely powerful, perhaps as strong as the vengeful ghosts from other famous houses. Terrified, he fled, muttering about his embarrassment as the city god of Jingyang County having to rely on Shen to handle these spirits. Just as he caught his breath outside the Sun Mansion gate, two beams of light suddenly appeared behind him, and a voice called out, addressing him directly. The city god noticed two young people appearing out of beams of light behind him, one in white, one in black. The one in black looked uncomfortable and asked the one in white for help getting up. The city god immediately recognized them as Fan Wujiu and Xiaxian and asked why they were there. They explained they'd come to guide a soul from the Sun family, since someone was going to pass away that night. The city god's face darkened, worried that with Shen Changqing around, there might be a conflict. He asked them to wait, mentioning that an expert was performing rituals in the courtyard. But the two flashed fierce smiles and warned him not to interfere, revealing they were sole officials personally appointed by King Yama. They then vanished in ghostly energy, flying straight into the Sun Mansion, leaving the city god frustrated and fuming, thinking they were acting overly important just because of their title. The commotion woke Shen Changqing, who sat up and muttered about the strange noise. Following the sound, he reached the front courtyard and realized it was coming from the mourning hall. Peeking inside, he saw old Sun Rong standing gloomily in front of a coffin while his subordinates nailed it shut. Old Sun Rong muttered sorrowfully to his son, promising that he would take care of him even in the afterlife, and that no one would trouble him there. Shen Changqing's face went pale with anger as he realized the cries were coming from a living person inside the coffin. After the coffin was sealed, old Sun Rong placed it next to another, decorating the two with red flowers and performing a ghost marriage ceremony for his son. Just as the ceremony began, a loud voice rang out from outside, demanding everyone stop immediately. Shen Changqing stormed into the mourning hall, fists clenched, face dark with anger. Old Sun Rong froze in place, clearly nervous, while cries from inside the coffin continued. Without a word, Shen Changqing glided past him and immediately went after the subordinates nailing the coffin. One got a strong kick to the head, nose bleeding, and the other dropped the hammer after another swift kick. Shen Changqing even stepped on the chest of a young man, glaring fiercely and shouting at them to stop. Old Sun Rong, desperate, grabbed the hammer himself, insisting that his son's happiness depended on finishing the ritual. Shen Changqing, now furious, kicked him into the wall, leaving him coughing and grimacing. Stepping in front of him, Shen Changqing grabbed old Sun Rong by the collar and warned him that the woman trapped in the coffin had a dangerous energy. If paired in a ghost marriage with his son, she could grow strong enough to cause trouble far beyond the Sun family, potentially affecting all of Jingyang County. Old Sun Rong trembled, worried, and asked if this was true. Shen Changqing quickly exaggerated, claiming that even experts from the Imperial Astronomical Bureau would listen to him, making old Sun Rong feel reassured and eager to obey. Shen Changqing wasted no time, ordering the subordinates to open the coffin immediately to save the girl. The subordinates hurried, prying out the nails, while Shen Changqing silently thought that saving one life was better than building 7 pagodas. Finally, the coffin lid was lifted, revealing the beautiful girl Shen Changqing had seen earlier. Old Sun Rong looked to Shen Changqing for guidance, asking what should be done next. Shen Changqing stepped in front of the coffin and told everyone to leave, saying he'd handle things from here. He looked at the coffin and quietly told the girl inside that he'd saved her life. Just then, he heard footsteps approaching. Someone was coming. He turned and saw the city god along with 2 people dressed in black and white. Shen Changqing thought to himself that they looked like black and white impermanents, probably here to compete for the job. The person in black glanced at Shen Changqing, unimpressed, thinking he was handsome but ordinary for an expert. The city god quickly introduced them as the 7th and 8th lords of the underworld. The 2 claimed they were there on King Yama's orders to collect the girl's soul and that even Shen Changqing couldn't interfere. Shen Changqing got annoyed, thinking the Sun family had probably tricked him into being pressured to hand her over. He slammed the coffin and boldly told them the girl was still alive. White impermanence sighed at his audacity, while black impermanence gathered ghostly energy, ready to act. Shen Changqing was stunned by their performance but stayed defiant, daring them to try. Black impermanence pointed forward, preparing to use his life-snatching technique, while the city god nervously watched, unsure if they could really act under Shen's presence. Then, black impermanence noticed something strange. The girl's soul seemed to have disappeared. He looked at white impermanence, both confused. White impermanence pulled out his weapon and tried to force Shen aside, but Shen fell to the ground, squinting and frowning, muttering that this guy really had no sense of martial virtue. It was a tense standoff, with Shen standing firm against the so-called experts. Shen Changqing grabbed a wooden stick and shouted that if they wanted to use force, they'd have to check with him first. Before they could react, he punched white impermanence straight in the face. White impermanence went flying, knocked out cold with a big bump on his head. Seeing this, black impermanence swung his soul-catching staff, threatening Shen. But Shen wasn't backing down. He grabbed his shovel, shouted back about defending a defenseless girl, and with a powerful elbow strike, blasted black impermanence into a wall. The force made black impermanence dizzy, and his ghostly energy dissipated. Even his staff broke in half, leaving him crying over the damage and worrying about explaining it to King Yama. Shen stepped closer, glaring at him, ready to strike again, when the city god rushed in, begging him to stop and claiming someone might get hurt. Shen turned, eyes dark, clearly annoyed that the city god wanted to join the chaos. The city god quickly backed off, letting Shen continue. Shen immediately went back to the fight, pulling black impermanence's tongue and stomping on white impermanence's back. The city god sighed helplessly, watching the brutal scene. After a while, Shen emerged victorious, even tying their long tongues into a bow, intimidating them and making them promise they wouldn't mess around again. Shen raised his shovel, sticking out his tongue and smirking, making the 2 terrified spirits beg him to untie them. Shen said he'd find some rope and take them to the authorities, then went off to get it. Meanwhile, the city god gently scooped up the 2 defeated spirits and flew them out of the mourning hall, apologizing along the way. Once the chaos settled, Shen stood in the middle of the hall, surrounded by scattered spirit money. Old Sun Rong rushed in, panicking about the loud noise. Shen calmly told him it was nothing, just a fight with something not human. Old Sun Rong freaked out, worried they were facing a vengeful ghost, and started shaking, holding his head, convinced they were doomed. Shen sighed, trying to calm him down, shouting for him to settle, but the old man was trembling too much to listen. Shen Changqing lowered his head, closed his eyes, and calmly explained what had happened. He told Old Sun Rong that all this mess started because he insisted on using Bai Dongni for a ghost marriage, which attracted vengeful spirits. Old Sun Rong, sweating and embarrassed, admitted his mistake and lowered his head, saying he knew he was wrong. Shen Changqing then turned around with a sly smile, making a little money gesture with his fingers, hinting that dealing with the vengeful ghost had cost him a lot of energy. Old Sun Rong quickly caught on, nervously agreeing to pay more, and Shen Changqing just chuckled, saying it was easy to teach these children. Meanwhile, in King Yama's hall, black and white impermanents returned to report what had happened. They were furious and tearful, complaining that someone had hit them with a shovel and even broken the divine mourning staff they were given. They insisted that this was completely unfair and demanded justice. King Yama opened the Book of Life and Death to check Bai Dongni's fate. He discovered she had technically died from being locked in a coffin on the 7th day of the 10th month. Furious at someone interfering with his soul officials, he shot out a stream of ghostly energy to investigate the culprit. The energy scanned the Book of Life and Death, but no one in Jingyang County matched the culprit. King Yama was shocked. How could someone escape the records of the three realms? Whether immortal, mortal, or demon, everyone should be in the book. He suspected this person was a hidden expert, protected by some higher power, and muttered about how troublesome it was. Below, black and white impermanents kept pleading for justice, kowtowing repeatedly. King Yama didn't know how to respond, so he reluctantly decided to put the matter aside for now, noting that Shen Changqing's absence from the Book of Life and Death was strange. Then, King Yama remembered Bai Dongni's case. He saw the Book of Life and Death shake violently, and in an instant, her fate changed. Instead of dying in the coffin, she would now die peacefully at a later time, giving her a proper, calm end. King Yama's eyes suddenly widened in shock, shouting that something had changed. Oxhead, Horseface, and black and white impermanents below all asked at once what had changed. King Yama stayed quiet for a moment, then whispered to an official beside him, wondering if the fate-changing technique could really be the work of that mysterious person. The official calmly reassured him that Bai Dongni would now die peacefully at the designated time. Both King Yama and the official exchanged relieved smiles, giving each other thumbs up and agreeing silently. Then King Yama slammed the table and scolded black and white impermanents for trying to collect her soul too early, docking their pay for half a year. The two soul officials looked shocked, confused about what they had done wrong. Just then, a ghost messenger arrived to report that it was almost the first anniversary of Sun Fuki's death. He suggested letting Sun Fuki return briefly to the mortal world to visit his family. The messenger pointed out the beautiful woman beside him, Sun Fuki's mother, who had died 10 years ago but hadn't fully moved on and was still lingering in the mortal realm. King Yama immediately assigned this task to black and white impermanents, warning them not to mess it up again, and they obediently accepted.
Back in the mortal world, Shen Changqing was strolling through the Sun family courtyard when he overheard old Sun Rong speaking to his deceased son, apologizing for not taking good care of him. Shen Changqing's eyes widened in shock, and he quietly moved closer to listen. He realized old Sun Rong's tone sounded guilty, as if he had pushed his son into danger rather than it being an accident. Shen Changqing bent down by the well and confirmed his suspicion. Sun Fuki's death wasn't accidental. It had been caused by his father. Immediately he rushed to the county yamen, pulling Magistrate Feng along at lightning speed. Shen Changqing warned him they couldn't waste a moment, or old Sun might get away. Magistrate Feng was shocked, unable to believe the kind and generous old Sun could have done such a thing. Shen Changqing, his face dark with determination, explained that he suspected Sun Fuki didn't just fall into the well, he had been pushed. Shen Changqing and Magistrate Feng reached the shallow well, and Shen pointed out the handprints on the edge. He explained that when Sun Fuki fell in, he hadn't dropped straight to the bottom. Someone must have struck him with a brick, leaving those marks. He remembered how Sun Rong had once locked a living girl in a coffin for a ghost marriage, which he luckily stopped in time. Over time, Sun Rong had become suspicious and guilt-ridden, always blaming himself in front of his son's coffin. Shen had felt uneasy and decided to check the well, confident the brick that caused Sun Fuki's fall was still down there. Inside the morning hall, incense smoke curled into the air. Old Sun Rong saw Shen Changqing and the magistrate approaching and asked politely why they were visiting so late. Shen Changqing's face turned pale with anger, and he shouted at Sun Rong, accusing him of pushing his own son into the well. Sun Rong stayed calm and tried to dismiss it as nonsense, claiming Shen was just dissatisfied with payment. Shen Changqing, smiling faintly, told him that if he lied in front of his son's coffin under the candlelight, he would face consequences from beyond. He noticed that while Sun Rong had once trembled at the mention of vengeful ghosts, now he seemed oddly calm talking about harming his son. There had to be more to the story. Shen decided to play along, pretending to summon the spirits to pressure him. Sun Rong tried to politely explain himself to the magistrate, claiming he had invited Shen for rituals and that the accusations were false. Shen Changqing, playing his role, raised his fingers and chanted mystic words, pretending to restore Fuki's lost fate. As he finished, a gust of wind blew out a candle, startling Sun Rong. Shen grinned secretly, knowing luck was on his side. He continued his act, calling out to Fuki's soul, and suddenly a stream of yin energy rose. Sun Fuki's soul appeared, holding a rattle and gliding through the door. Both Sun Rong and Magistrate Feng froze, pale and sweating. The spirit moved past the magistrate, who cried out in shock that Sun Fuki had really appeared. The ghost silently trembled, lamenting and asking his father not to push him down. Sun Rong reached out, full of regret, but Fuki's spirit hesitated. Shen Changqing stood to the side, watching everything unfold, thinking thinking to himself with a sly smile that he might have succeeded even faster than he expected. Shen Changqing and Magistrate Feng stood by the well, and Feng gave Shen a thumbs up, impressed by the soul-summoning display. Shen just shrugged, saying it was a clever psychological trick. Nighttime makes people vulnerable, he explained, and Sun Rong had been restless and guilty for a long time. Today happened to be the first 7-day memorial for Sun Fuqi, so Shen used the moment to break Sun Rong's defenses. Then he stepped forward, grabbed Sun Rong's collar, and pointed out the handprints on the well and the rock at the bottom, proof of what had really happened. Old Sun Rong broke down, tears streaming, confessing to his son and wife. He admitted he had pushed Fuqi into the well and that his wife had suffered because of his desire for a child. He said he had only wanted to protect her from ongoing illness, but in trying to do what he thought was best, both mother and child had suffered. As he spoke, the spirit of his wife appeared beside Fuqi, silent but present, emphasizing the weight of his guilt. Sun Rong tried to explain himself, describing the night he struck Fuqi's hands with a rock by the well, crying that he did it to protect him. He knelt, begging for forgiveness. Shen Changqing immediately stepped in, slapping him and scolding him harshly, questioning whose suffering he had really thought about. He reminded Sun Rong that his wife had willingly given birth despite knowing she might not live long and that Fuqi had been just a helpless child. Shen called Sun Rong out for being selfish and cruel, even giving him another kick to drive the point home. Magistrate Feng watched silently, shaken by the scene, glancing at the souls of the mother and child with a heavy heart. As dawn approached, the spirits of mother and son stepped out, ready to leave with black and white impermanence. One whispered to the other that their mission was complete and they needed to hurry before anyone noticed. The first light of morning and the distant crowing of roosters marked the end of this tragic, yet eye-opening night. After that, black and white impermanence, along with the spirits of mother and son, left the Sun household and returned to the underworld. The sky brightened quickly, and Magistrate Feng ordered his assistants to arrest old Sun Rong and take him to court to face justice. Suddenly, Dongni appeared out of nowhere, running straight toward Shen Changqing. She startled Magistrate Feng, who warned Shen to be careful. Dongni's 2 large, round, white rabbits bumped into Shen's chest as she approached, pretending to be shy, asking if he could take her in. Shen was caught off guard, blushing at the sudden closeness, and awkwardly stammered. Dongni explained that she had been sold to the Sun household and now had no home to return to, asking him to take her in. Shen smiled gently, handing her a clean white handkerchief, then squatted down and told her she could come along and help with simple chores like boiling water and cooking rice. Dongni's eyes filled with tears, her face glowing with gratitude, and she promised to obey his words faithfully. Meanwhile, at the city god temple, people were coming and going constantly. The city god sat proudly in his chair, glowing with spiritual energy, still recalling the events of the previous night. He explained that Shen Changqing hadn't really fought the 7th and 8th lords of the underworld. It had been more like a display of skill that left everyone stunned. Outside the temple, a young lady named Chang Yue and her maid approached carefully. Chang Yu knelt before the city god statue, praying for her mother's long life and restored health, and hoping to meet a true immortal to help her. As she prayed, a beam of golden light suddenly shot out from her, shining directly onto the city god, who was stunned by her pure filial heart. The judge explained that she was the emperor's beloved daughter, Chang Yue praying for her mother, Empress Jiangsun, but there was nothing the minor city gods could do because the empress's death was already recorded in the book of life and death. At that moment, Magistrate Feng arrived, leading Shen Changqing and Bai Dongni into the temple. Shen looked around with a bright smile, thinking about the previous trickster antics and realizing he could use the magistrate's authority to teach a lesson. Turning to Feng, he invited him to follow inside. Feng hesitated, saying he was just a mortal and didn't think he could be of much help. Shen Changqing smiled and told Magistrate Feng not to worry, saying he was just taking him to meet someone. Then he led Feng quickly into the city god temple. Once inside, he waved his hand and called out, making the city god, who had been sitting high above, drop in shock. The city god and the martial judge quickly appeared, greeting Shen respectfully and insisting there was no need for such a show. They already knew about his skills. Chang Yu and her maid standing nearby were stunned. Their eyes widened as they realized they were witnessing real immortals. Shen Changqing laughed, teasing the city god for his earlier negligence and scolding him lightly for letting mortals' affairs be disrupted. The city god, realizing Shen's point, admitted their mistake and promised not to repeat it. Princess Chang Yue and her maid watched Shen and his group in awe. The maid whispered that Shen might be someone extraordinary, but before she could finish, Chang Yue leapt forward, kneeling in front of Shen and clinging to his legs, tears streaming down her face. She begged him to save her mother's life, explaining that her father had already invited the famous physician Sun Simiao, but nothing had worked. She promised that her father would meet any conditions Shen might set. The city god leaned close to Shen and whispered that, for Empress Jangsun's illness, only Shen had the ability to help. Shen internally panicked, thinking he was just a technician and had no special medicine to treat her asthma. Changyu clasped her hands tighter, tears in her eyes, pleading sincerely for Shen to help her mother. Shen Changqing wiped the sweat off his forehead, thinking to himself that he wanted to help, but he wasn't a doctor. If he failed to cure Empress Jangsun, it could be disastrous. And if he refused to go, Princess Changyue might report him to her father, which could get him in serious trouble. He figured the only way to survive was to keep up the trickster act. He admitted quietly to himself that helping her was almost impossible. He had maybe a 20% chance to succeed. Changyu's face lit up at even that small hope, thanking him profusely. The city god and martial judge overheard and were shocked. Realizing how bold Shen was to even attempt something that went against the fate recorded in the Book of Life and Death, Chang Yue, eager to leave, grabbed Shen's hand and urged him to go to Chang'an immediately. Shen, trying to keep his composure, said they could take a short detour to his old home for some supplies first. Though inside he was stressed, thinking about how little time they had. Chang Yu reassured him that she would protect his home while they were away. Soon, the horse carriage set off, beginning the long journey to Chang'an. A few days later, they reached Mingde Gate. Chang Yu suggested he rest at the relay station for a day, and she promised to bring him into the palace the next morning to treat her mother. Shen smiled, agreeing outwardly, but inside he was grumbling. He didn't exactly want to go to Chang'an to treat some empress if it weren't for fear of the emperor. With some free time, Shen wandered the bustling streets of Chang'an, impressed by the city's prosperity. He stopped at an inn to grab some food, enjoying a steaming bowl of rice soup with meat, fish, and vegetables. Holding a slightly cold duck leg, he muttered that at least it hadn't gone bad. An elderly man entered, asking to share Shen's table since the inn was crowded. Shen gladly made room. The old man introduced himself as Wei Zheng, the Grand Master of Remonstrance, and smiled politely. Just then, the waiter brought a fresh bowl of the inn's mutton soup to the table. Shen Changqing and old Wei Zheng sat across from each other at the inn. Wei Zheng opened his wooden box to reveal a batch of fragrant green vegetables, and the smell immediately caught Shen's attention. He recognized it as pickled celery, a perfect side to cut through rich flavors. Wei Zheng laughed, mentioning that his wife's pickled celery was famous in Chang'an, irresistible even to outsiders. At the same time, the aroma from Shen's golden roasted duck leg drifted over, making Wei Zheng's eyes widen. Shen grinned and offered to trade his duck leg for Wei Zheng's celery. Wei Zheng agreed, shaking his head at Shen's apparent foolishness. But as soon as Wei Zheng brought the duck leg close, a shimmering golden dragon appeared, filling the room with energy. He took a bite, and instantly his face flushed red, his body trembling with delight, as if he'd tasted something from the heavens. Shen Changqing, observing all this, got up and quietly slipped out of the inn, thinking it was safer to leave before Wei Zheng realized he had vanished. Later, Wei Zheng came back to his senses, puzzled and muttering to himself about Shen's cleverness in giving him such an unexpected experience without causing trouble. The next day, Chang Yu led Shen Changqing to the emperor to formally introduce him. The emperor praised Shen's legendary reputation and expressed hope for Empress Jangsun's recovery, even teasing about possible rejuvenation techniques. Shen bowed politely, keeping his composure. Later, in the empress's palace, Shen entered the bedchamber. The emperor gently explained that he had brought an expert to examine the empress. The empress looked Shen over and thought he seemed ordinary, wondering if the emperor had been tricked. Shen waved his hand modestly, while inwardly panicking, thinking about how even the famous Sun Simiao couldn't cure asthma. He knew he could only continue his careful act and hope for the best. Shen Changqing raised 2 fingers and told the emperor and empress that fate was tricky and medicine might not help much. He claimed he had a method to help the empress, but it only had about a 20% chance of success. If it worked, she'd be healthy for life. If it failed, well, Shen hesitated, and both the emperor and empress immediately asked what would happen. Shen calmly said that if it failed, it might be difficult for her to survive past a certain date. The empress instantly realized he had correctly predicted her fate, thinking that only an immortal could know such details without even looking at her. Inside, Shen was panicking, secretly thinking about how his education and planning might just save him. The empress, reassured, urged her husband to let Shen try. Shen then explained his simple method. He only needed a pear and a bowl of rootless water, which he would prepare personally into a cold pear drink for the empress. The emperor quickly ordered a eunuch to fetch the ingredients. Just as the eunuch stepped out, 4 officials suddenly appeared at the door. Zhang Sun Wuji, Sun Simao, Yuan Tiangang, and old Wei Zheng. They begged the emperor not to let anything happen to the empress. The emperor got furious, accusing them of trying to interfere or rebel. while Shen quietly chuckled inside, seeing this as the perfect chance to sneak back to 10 Mile Village for his roast duck business. The officials quickly bowed low when the Emperor's dragon-like aura flared, apologizing and calming him down. Following the Emperor's signal, the eunuch led Shen to the imperial kitchen to prepare his elixir. Shen couldn't help but think how strange it was that the Emperor trusted a complete stranger like him over Sun Sima, the famous divine physician. Meanwhile, Sun Sima protested loudly, insisting Shen was a fraud and warning the Emperor not to trust him. The Emperor snapped at him angrily, while old Wei Zheng stepped in to calmly advise caution. The Emperor was fuming, glaring at Wei Zheng for meddling in family affairs. Wei Zheng calmly explained that the Empress wasn't just a wife, she was the mother of the nation. Her health affected the whole country, and it was his duty to speak up. He warned that Shen Changqing's background was mysterious, and trusting him blindly just because Princess Changyu said so wasn't wise. Princess Changyu stepped forward, insisting she had seen everything with her own eyes. Wei Zheng gently pulled her aside, warning her that her love for her mother might make her fall for a trick. Since fraudsters could be very convincing, then Yuan Tiangang joined in, saying he had studied the stars and divinations and that the Empress's fate was already set, hard to change. The Emperor, frustrated, turned to Sun Sima and Yuan Tiangang, questioning why the Empress hadn't improved under their care and if they had truly done their jobs. Just then, a voice announced that the elixir was ready. Everyone turned, including the Emperor and Chang Yu, who smiled in relief. Shen Changqing entered with the eunuch, presenting his pear water with confidence and suggesting they test it for safety first. He secretly thought to himself that it was just ordinary pear water, harmless even if nothing happened. Sun Sima immediately objected, insisting that pears were cold in nature and useless for the Empress's condition. The Emperor, angry, yelled at him. Shen Changqing then praised Sun Sima politely, admitting his own method was weak and had only a 20% chance of success, making the point that the Empress should still follow the doctor's advice if it didn't work. Sun Sima was silently fuming, feeling mocked. Wei Zheng, observing Shen Changqing, realized this was the same mysterious Taoist whose duck leg had hidden dragon energy. He guessed that this pear water might be equally special and boldly spoke up in the Emperor's presence, objecting to the skepticism. Zhang Sun Wuji and Sun Sima watched in awe, thinking how Wei Zheng truly was a loyal minister, courageous enough to speak the truth even in front of the Son of Heaven. Wei Zheng suddenly closed his eyes and spoke firmly, insisting that Shen Changqing's pear water didn't need testing for poison. He trusted Shen's powers completely. Sun Sima and Zhang Sun Wuji, hearing this, were so shocked they practically fainted backward. Shen Changqing, watching Wei Zheng, smiled wryly, teasing that he had once given him a duck leg, and now Wei Zheng was turning around to corner him. He reminded himself that a simple bowl of pear water couldn't cure the Empress's asthma. Yuan Tiangang then stepped forward, kneeling before the Emperor, and expressed agreement with Wei Zheng. He admitted he had also seen Shen Changqing's extraordinary abilities. Sun Sima, feeling slightly confident, thought at first that Yuan would back him, but instead Yuan supported Shen, leaving the two doctors stunned. They couldn't believe Shen dared to attempt something so bold, even claiming a 20% chance against fate itself. Seeing the officials bickering endlessly, Princess Changyu decided to act. She took a spoonful of the pear water herself. Immediately, she felt a rush of heat and energy coursing through her, eyes squinting from the sensation. Zhang Sun Wuji panicked, thinking something was wrong, and called to arrest Shen as a fraud. But the reality was completely different. A radiant golden phoenix aura appeared around Chang Yue as she staggered, feeling like immortal energy flooding her body, making her act wildly. She even started twirling and dancing like in a ballet, mesmerizing Wei Zheng and Yuan Tiangang. Yuan Tiangang admitted he had no idea what was happening, and even Chang Yue's excitement settled into confusion after a moment. She sheepishly apologized to the Emperor, explaining that the pear water's effect had made her act strangely and that she truly believed it could help her mother. Shen Changqing just laughed, telling her she was overthinking. It was just a normal bowl of pear water with a little extra sugar. Finally, the Emperor carried the pear water to the Empress. She drank it all at once without hesitation. Instantly, the Empress felt revitalized, as if stepping into a realm of immortals. Her spirit brightened, her cheeks flushed, and she transformed from a frail, tired woman into a youthful, radiant beauty. After drinking the pear water, the Empress leaned into the Emperor's arms, sighing happily and saying she truly felt cured and refreshed. Shen Changqing, Sun Sima, and Zhang Sun Wuji were all stunned. Sun Sima, still in disbelief, stepped forward to check her pulse. After a moment, his eyes went wide. She was really healed. Wei Zheng and Yuan Tiangang stepped up too, praising Shen Changqing's extraordinary effortless abilities, calling him a truly otherworldly expert. Shen Changqing himself couldn't help thinking, can a simple bowl of pear water really fix what the Medicine King couldn't? Seeing this, Sun Simao's skepticism turned into awe. He knelt and begged Shen Changqing to teach him, amazed at how someone so young could wield such powerful medical skills. That evening, the emperor held a grand banquet in Shen Changqing's honor. Dancers performed, the hall was lively, and everyone celebrated the empress's recovery. Crown Prince Li Chengqian stood and suggested a general amnesty for the entire realm so people could celebrate. Shen Changqing and Wei Zheng immediately objected, arguing that the law was already lenient, and an amnesty now could harm innocent people and go against the emperor's intentions. Shen Changqing stayed humble, thinking to himself that he should be careful not to reveal too much. The crown prince frowned, annoyed that Shen kept opposing him, but he tried to save face. He brought a cup of tea to Shen Changqing and whispered a veiled threat, warning him not to interfere. Shen Changqing didn't flinch. He coldly teased the crown prince about a secret illness he hadn't healed yet. Li Chengqian froze, his face turning pale, clearly rattled by Shen Changqing's words, and couldn't utter a single response. Shen Changqing quickly grabbed the crown prince's hand when he noticed him looking uneasy, gently warning him to be careful. He leaned close and whispered something that made the crown prince's face turn pale, cold sweat dripping down. Feeling frustrated, the crown prince left, muttering to himself about how Shen knew too much, especially about his private matters. Meanwhile, Shen Changqing smiled quietly, thinking how amusing it was to watch the crown prince squirm. As the banquet continued, the emperor drank heavily, eventually slumping in his seat and asking Shen Changqing how one could achieve immortality and eternal youth. Shen, a little tipsy himself, leaned back, shouted, and then suddenly stood up, slapping the table with a flushed face. He staggered around, mumbling nonsense about flags and shooting birds, before suddenly launching into morning exercises in the middle of the hall. Every movement radiated bright golden spiritual energy, astonishing everyone watching. Yuan Tiangang and Jiang Sun Wuji were in awe, whispering that Shen's movements, though casual, showed the mastery of a true expert, completely in harmony with the universe. Shen's energy condensed into an 8 trigrams formation, then morphed into a golden fish swimming in clear water, surrounding him with flowing spiritual energy. He danced and performed martial arts, the energy splashing toward the emperor and empress, who stared in astonishment at this immortal technique they'd never seen before. Shen Changqing continued, summoning golden talismans and radiant light so bright that even the emperor and empress had to shield their eyes. Laughing like a madman, he finally collapsed onto the floor, prompting the palace maids to panic and rush over. Yuan Tiangang calmly suggested that Shen was simply too drunk. The maids fanned him, and Shen muttered in his tipsy haze that he was indeed very drunk, much to everyone's mix of concern and amusement. Old Yuan Tiangang leaned close to the emperor and whispered that Shen Changqing's drunken display was actually a clever cultivation technique, blending the Tao, 8 trigrams, and 5 elements, and that it could really promote longevity. He suggested Shen was pretending to be drunk to secretly teach them this method. The emperor asked how to reward him, and Wei Zheng calmly advised to let Shen decide for himself later, which the emperor agreed was wise. That night, Shen Changqing was carried back to Wei Zheng's residence on a stretcher. Even while passed out, he had a small smile on his face and muttered about being unable to drink more. At one point, he even made a sudden retching motion, startling the attendants. The next day, Shen strolled through the streets of Chang'an, casually noting how easy the emperor had been to deal with. Before leaving the court, the emperor had already gifted him a chest of gold as travel money, showing his appreciation. Shen smiled and accepted it, and to everyone's amazement, his money pouch sucked up all the gold instantly. He awkwardly tried to downplay it, calling it a small trick, but inside he was furious at the system for automatically snatching the gold, muttering about how unfair it was and how tough making money had become. Just then, someone called out to him about a fish they'd caught that morning. Shen turned and saw a humble fortune-telling stall on the street with an old man holding a folding fan, Yuan Shoucheng. Shen couldn't help but shake his head, thinking it was ironic that in a place as grand as Chang'an, his colleague had ended up running such a modest setup. Shen Changqing pulled a small gold nugget from his pocket and, half joking, set it on the table and asked the old fortune-teller to read his fate. The old man handed him 3 coins, and Shen tossed them without thinking. To everyone's surprise, the coins stood upright on the table. Shen froze, wondering what kind of luck that was and whether trouble was about to rain down on him. Old Yuan went pale too. He'd read many signs but never seen anything like this. An 8 trigrams pattern bloomed on the table, and golden spiritual energy radiated out. Yuan Shucheng muttered a quick charm and sent out a blue stream of energy. Suddenly, tears of awe welled in his eyes as a majestic vision of an emperor filled his mind. The experience shook him so much he fell backward. Terrified and respectful, Yuan knelt and pushed the gold back to Shen, insisting this was beyond his skill. The man before him seemed to have transcended ordinary fate. Shen accepted the gold, still baffled and a little embarrassed about his shabby clothes. Right then, a rude young man kicked over the next table and started shouting that the fortune teller was a fraud, daring him to predict tomorrow's weather down to the hour. Yan calmly answered with an elaborate forecast: clouds at 1 hour, thunder later, heavy rain in the afternoon, and the young man smirked and threatened to wreck the stall if the prediction failed. Shen watched the exchange with a grim expression, while Yuan, seeing Shen's look, thought the senior must have seen something in that young man's future and felt a pang of sympathy. Shen Changqing shook his head with a long sigh, exhaling a puff of smoke, thinking the Taoist was acting a bit reckless by giving so many details. It was basically asking for trouble. Outside the city gate, the streets were busy with people moving about. Princess Changyue appeared holding a cheerful little boy. She waved and called out for Shen Changqing. He immediately stepped forward, bowed respectfully, and she told him not to be so formal. She introduced the boy as her younger brother, Li Ji, who was 9, and explained that the emperor wanted them to see Shen off. Li Ji clasped his hands politely to greet Shen. The princess had even arranged a perfect horse carriage for him, which left Shen pleasantly surprised. He thanked her and asked her to convey his gratitude to the emperor. A few days later, Shen Changqing returned to Shen Manor in 10 Mile Village. He knocked on the door and Bai Dongni came out with a huge smile. She knelt in greeting, looking shy and flushed, saying she was worried he wouldn't come back. Dongni's younger sister and the little fox spirit jumped forward to hug him, which even surprised Princess Changyue. They invited him inside to share a feast prepared to welcome him home. Shen Changqing raised his cup, excitedly telling everyone that now he'd show them wonders from 2,000 years in the future. Dong Li, Little Qing, and the little fox spirit took it as an invitation to ascend to the immortal realm together. The two sisters got up and offered a dance to thank him. Princess Changyue joined in, playing the pipa and filling the room with enchanting music. Dong Li danced gracefully, and Little Qing showed off a new, playful style. Shen Changqing laughed and enjoyed the performance, raising his cup for another drink. The little fox spirit jumped on the table and sniffed a few drops of Shen's homemade immortal wine. Its eyes widened as it felt the dense spiritual energy and the intoxicating taste. Meanwhile, little Li Ji munched on a chicken leg, staring at the dancing and singing with sparkling eyes, clearly mesmerized by the beautiful girls. After the dance, the sisters teased Shen, asking if he liked the performance. The city god and martial judge watched from afar, muttering that those girls are lucky to be with an expert like Shen. Night turns to dawn. Shen wakes up in a panic to find Bai Dongni nearby and stumbles through half-remembered thoughts, nervously asking himself what happened last night and whether he lost control while drunk. He mumbles to calm himself, insisting that if he was really that drunk, nothing improper could have happened. Bai Dongni calls his name, smiles, gets dressed, and quietly leaves the room. Shen pretends to snore so she won't notice his fluster. Once she's gone, Shen checks a small jade bell nearby and worries about the worst-case outcome, joking to himself that the only real risk might be an unintended marriage. He even imagines Googling what to do, then reminds himself that a very drunk man usually can't be blamed for anything. The household is sleepy and affectionate. The sisters and little fox spirit nap and talk in their sleep, each claiming the immortal master for themselves. Princess Changyue and little Li Ji arrive. Li Ji immediately kneels and begs to study under Shen, offering to do humble chores. Shen laughs, accepts, and Changyue hurries back to tell her father the good news. Shen finally gets a moment of calm after a hectic palace stay. Suddenly the mood shifts. A huge water dragon aura appears outside the hall, and a voice demands that Li Shimin come out and answer for his actions. In other words, the speaker says the emperor must face consequences for what's happened. Early the next morning, Shen Changqing was back at his mansion. 3 new secret manuals appeared on his table, one for making soap, one for distilling liquor, and another for crafting fragrant flower greeting cards. The system panel reminded him of the remaining time. 12 hours, 33 minutes, 23 seconds. Shen frowned, annoyed. He remembered that small top-ups before had only given him trivial items. He muttered that he hoped spending 648 yuan wouldn't trick him this time. Confidently, he pressed the confirm button. Instantly, a huge treasure chest appeared before him, glowing so brightly that Shen had to step back and shield his eyes. He could barely contain his excitement, drooling as he wondered what treasures lay inside. But the moment he opened it, a new manual appeared. 3,000 questions and answers on pig farming techniques. Shen's face went pale, and he angrily tossed it aside, muttering about how ridiculous it was. Before he could dwell on it, a noise came from the door. It was Li Zhi, cheerful and polite, asking what he should do today. Shen's mood instantly shifted. He smiled slyly, realizing that the pig farming manual could be useful for starting a roast duck business, with Li Zhi as his free helper. Shen stepped outside, trying to sound serious, and asked Li Zhi if he was ready to endure some hardship to help the common people have meat. Li Ji enthusiastically agreed, and Shen handed him the pig farming manual. Just then, Bai Dongni rushed in, panting, and told Shen that an old man named Yuan Tiangang was waiting to see him. Outside, Yuan Tiangang was kneeling, tears streaming down his face, begging for Shen's help. Shen closed his eyes, broke into a cold sweat, and calmly told him to stand up so they could talk. Yuan Tiangang explained that it was a delicate matter and suggested it might be some strange illness that Shen could cure. Once, Bai Dongni and Li Ji left with instructions to buy pigs and start practicing from the manual. Shen lowered his voice and asked Yuan Tiangang what was really going on. Yuan Tiangang shook his head and clarified that it wasn't about him personally, it was His Majesty. Early that morning, Shen Changqing was trying to process what Yuan Tiangang had just told him. Apparently, the emperor wasn't physically sick in the usual way, but was acting strangely, saying odd things and avoiding people. Yuan explained that he believed it might be caused by some supernatural entanglement. He admitted that with his limited Taoist skills, he couldn't fix it and begged Shen to help. Shen Changqing's eyes widened in shock. He thought about how he had just cured Empress Jiangsun and now the emperor's turn. He stroked his chin, imagining the worst. What if the emperor's condition was some kind of paranoid delusion? If he tried to help and failed, or if the emperor thought he was a threat, his head could be in serious trouble. He shivered at the thought and muttered that he was still young and didn't want to die in such a messy way. Yuan Tiangang reminded him that the emperor had placed all his hopes on him. Shen internally cursed his team. This was exactly the kind of situation he hated. If he went, he might get punished. If he didn't, he'd look heartless. Yuan Tiangang insisted, urging him to leave immediately. Shen realized there was no choice, and Yuan clarified that Li Ji would stay behind because the emperor didn't want the young crown prince to see him in this state. Then Yuan led Shen to 2 horses. Shen stared at them, thinking about how exhausting it had been to travel by carriage before, and wondering if he really had to ride all the way to Chang'an. Yuan, imagining Shen flying on a sword like a proper Taoist hero, silently respected his patience for choosing to ride a horse instead. Shen sighed, admitting he could ride, but warned he wasn't fast or particularly skilled. Just then, a bark echoed nearby. It was the little fox spirit, insisting it would come along this time. Shen laughed and hugged it, agreeing to take it with him. Finally, Shen and Yuan mounted their horses and began the journey to Chang'an. Before leaving, Shen reminded the little fox spirit not to cause trouble once they arrived, treating it with the same mix of care and authority as always. The fox seemed pleased, and with that, they set off on their unusual ride toward the capital. When Shen Changqing and old Yuan Tiangang arrived at the imperial palace in Chang'an, Yuan basically dragged Shen by the hand straight toward the emperor's bedchamber, urging him to hurry. But as they approached, they froze. 2 imposing generals were standing guard outside, one with a halberd and the other with an iron whip. It was clear they were Yu Qigong and Qin Qiang, looking every bit as formidable as history said. Yuan quickly told Shen to use his magic to subdue whatever supernatural trouble was affecting the emperor. Shen internally groaned. He couldn't believe Yuan was trying to send him in alone. He reminded himself not to fall for any trick and insisted that Yuan come in with him for backup. Yuan agreed, smiling and following Shen's lead. Inside, the 2 generals whispered to each other, doubting Shen's abilities, but they had no better options. Shen stepped in and saw the emperor surrounded by thick, dark energy, clearly in some sort of mental collapse. Shen quickly decided to try a modern, practical approach to handle the situation. He asked Yuan to fetch the 4 treasures of the study, then placed a black stone on paper. Pulling out a brush, he studied the ancient patterns and murmured an incantation about ghosts and spirits, noting how vengeful spirits feared humans, and vice versa. Even Yuan was shocked, recognizing the seal as a fragment of the stone used by Nuwa to mend the sky. Pretty incredible. Dipping the brush in ink, Shen drew distorted symbols, and suddenly a stream of black and white energy shot up. Hundreds of ghostly figures scattered, and the energy flowed into the emperor, directly targeting the dragon-shaped spirit inside his chest. The emperor winced, eyes rolling back as his mind cleared a little. Yuan stood behind, stunned at Shen's incredible technique. He'd never seen such powerful Taoist methods before, and even the ghostly spirit had no chance against them. The ghost inside the emperor thrashed and cried out, frustrated that it couldn't use any of its powers and was trapped by Shen's talisman. Shen just smiled, thinking to himself that sometimes the simplest, cleverest methods, like a well-placed spiritual seal, worked better than brute force. After the ghost spirit in the emperor's body was neutralized, the emperor slowly regained consciousness. He looked around and thanked Shen Changqing, saying that earlier Wei Zheng had claimed he'd handled everything with the underworld to keep him safe, and now, thanks to Shen, he'd avoided any trouble. Xin bowed politely and told the emperor not to worry, that everything was under control. Shen noticed that the emperor was still talking a bit nonsense here and there, a sign of paranoid delusions. Meanwhile, in King Yama's hall, King Yama was pacing nervously, holding his head. He was worried because Wei Zheng had been sent to bring Li Shimin's soul, but the boy hadn't returned yet. Suddenly, the book of life and death began to move on its own, and King Yama's eyes went wide in shock. Li Shimin, who was supposed to die in the 11th year of Zhenguan, now had his fate shifted to the 33rd year. Furious and alarmed, King Yama called out to Oxhead, Horseface, and the black and white impermanents, ordering them to hurry to Chang'an and fetch Li Shimin's soul. Back in the palace, an old man came in and asked Shen why he hadn't completely destroyed the ghost spirit. Shen explained casually that it wasn't necessary. The spirit had been suppressed, and language therapy worked better than total destruction. He suggested they instead ask the Emperor what had happened recently. The Emperor rubbed his head and explained that after Shen left, he had dreamed of meeting someone calling himself the Dragon King of Jinghe. The Dragon King claimed that because the Emperor and Yuan Shucheng had won a bet, they had secretly altered the timing and amount of rainfall. Now the Dragon King wanted Wei Sheng to punish him. The Emperor had invited Wei Zheng to play chess, keeping him busy until he napped, and only then did the Dragon King transform into a ghostly figure, trying to claim the Emperor's life for breaking a promise. Shen's face went pale as he realized what was going on. He muttered that this was almost like a plot from Journey to the West. Observing the situation, he figured that many martial arts experts in the Great Tang were skilled with acrobatics. So the Emperor's Dragon King trouble was probably a trick by an unjust immortal deity trying to scare him. The Emperor groaned, clutching his chest, and explained that he had no idea this had happened. And if Wei Zheng had finished the Dragon King in his dream, it wasn't his fault at all. Shen Changqing gently patted the Emperor's shoulder and reassured him that this situation wasn't his fault. He explained that the old superstitious folks of the Great Tang might not take a straight answer seriously, so he had to play along like a fake fortune teller to get them to back off. Just then, outside the bedchamber, 4 streams of ghostly energy shot toward the room, and Oxhead, Horseface, and Black and White Impermanence appeared one by one. Horseface blew out a confusing soul energy that made the 2 standing generals freeze on the spot. They reminded each other that their mission was to fetch Li Shimin's soul, and there would be rewards for completing it. As they stepped into the room, the 3 ghostly figures froze for a moment, clearly surprised. Shen Changqing saw this and thought to himself that there were definitely unjust forces trying to snatch the Emperor, even going so far as to play dress-up. Black and White Impermanence immediately spotted Shen and shouted angrily, demanding that he surrender. Shen Changqing just chuckled, holding the black stone in his hand, feeling confident. He figured their attacks were nothing serious and charged straight at Black Impermanence. But this time, Black Impermanence tried to dodge, bragging that Shen relied only on magic while he had martial arts skills. Shen just gritted his teeth, refusing to be intimidated. In a flash, Shen struck with the black stone, hitting Black Impermanence squarely in the chest and sending him flying. The imposter landed at Shen's feet, and Shen stepped on him, teasing that he could take on all of them, whether one at a time or together. Oxhead watched, frowning, thinking Shen looked calm and confident but didn't seem to have any noticeable magical energy. He slammed his trident into the ground and reminded everyone that today was supposed to be Li Shimin's death day, and that the old dragon was waiting for judgment, so there was no way Shen could linger in the mortal world. Shen remained quiet, analyzing the situation, suspecting that some of the bystanders outside had already been affected. Oxhead stepped closer and demanded that Shen come along quickly. The Emperor freaked out and shouted for his guards, but Shen Changqing calmly told him that everyone who could help was already out cold, so there was nothing they could do but listen. Oxhead then pointed at Shen and said he had been obstructing the underworld and would have to come along. Shen, far from scared, gripped the black stone in his hand, charged up with golden lightning, and told them to get lost. Oxhead tried to counter Shen's attack, thinking it was just a simple trick, but suddenly he realized he couldn't control his powers or dodge. Shen's black stone hit him full force, rolling him around several times. Oxhead was stunned, wondering what kind of strange magic Shen was using. Shen charged again, landing repeated hits while joking about how tough Oxhead's head was, calling him trash, and kept striking him until he was completely overwhelmed. Oxhead realized the attacks were weakening him in a weird way, as if Shen's words had real power, and he fainted. Meanwhile, the little fox spirit got mad and jumped in, barking furiously at White and Black Impermanence. Shen laughed and told old Yuan Tiangang to watch, teasing that even little White was better at helping than him. The fox spirit then revealed its 9-tailed fox aura, scaring White and Black Impermanence so badly they froze. Before they could react, Shen's black stone flew and hit Horseface squarely, leaving him dazed and confused. Shen grinned, spinning the black stone, teasing that only one was left. White Impermanence tried to challenge him, but charged straight at Shen, who barely moved, letting the attack come in before gently countering it, making White Impermanence look completely defeated. In no time, Shen had subdued all 4, Oxhead, Horseface, and Black and White Impermanence, and tied them up. He bent down, picked up the little fox spirit, and chuckled, saying that the fight was all done. Shen Changqing flipped the little fox spirit over and scratched its belly, making it squirm and feel super comfortable. He chuckled, saying, "Little White really knows how to help him out." Old Yuan Tiangang, watching, nervously turned away and wiped sweat from his forehead. He reminded Shen that Oxhead and Horseface were serious underworld enforcers, and black and white impermanents were underworld messengers. Injuring them could bring trouble because, even if the underworld isn't extremely powerful, they're still respected immortals backed by the gods of the celestial court. Shen thought about it, realizing the old Taoist was right. These underworld folks are no joke. They even dared to storm the imperial palace to snatch the emperor, but now that he'd already stirred up trouble with them, his best move was to stick close to the emperor and gain his trust, so when the time comes, he could sweep away all the bad spirits safely. Shen decided to focus on the emperor first. He bowed respectfully and told him the underworld troublemakers were captured, but he still needed the emperor to clearly explain what happened with the ghost immortal in his body. The emperor agreed. Suddenly, purple yin energy mixed with white energy surged from the emperor's body. He groaned in pain, and a remnant soul appeared behind him, with tiny dragon horns and eyes full of resentment, muttering over and over about how unfair everything was. Shen was shocked, realizing he couldn't deal directly with the emperor's second personality. He needed to use the captured Oxhead and Horseface to help. Shen gave Oxhead a firm slap that twisted his face, then did the same to Horseface. Both were stunned, asking in confusion what they had done. Shen crossed his arms and gave them a serious glare, saying he had some questions and they needed to answer carefully, or else who knows what might happen. They nodded nervously, completely white in the face and unable to resist. Shen then gave Horseface a playful, exaggerated slap, joking about being a Taoist and not an immortal master, which made Horseface grind his teeth in humiliation. Oxhead, seeing his friend embarrassed, headbutted him lightly to make him admit the truth. Then Oxhead whispered to Horseface that Shen was clearly a super powerful master, someone whose words practically become law, maybe even a reincarnated golden immortal. Horseface broke into a cold sweat, realizing Shen's true strength. Meanwhile, Shen paced back and forth, thinking aloud about the Dragon King of Jingye. He wondered if the Dragon King was really wrong for causing a fuss with Yuan Shucheng, all in an effort to protect his people from harm. The remnant soul behind the emperor shouted that it wasn't wrong, insisting it had acted fairly. Horseface, sweating buckets, quickly agreed, saying it was reasonable too. Shen Changqing juggled the black stone in his hand and asked if Yuan Shucheng was wrong for doing fortune-telling to help people live better lives. Oxhead's eyes widened and he nervously said it wasn't wrong at all. Even the emperor frowned and admitted that Yuan Shucheng hadn't done anything wrong. Shen stepped forward, bowing respectfully, and told the emperor that although he had tried to help the Dragon King, he couldn't fully control magic, which allowed Wei Zheng to defeat the dragon in a dream, but it wasn't the emperor's fault. The emperor agreed, saying he had done his best. Then Shen looked seriously at Oxhead and Horseface and asked why they had come to bother the emperor and try to take his soul. Both were stunned, their faces going pale, and they admitted they had been wrong and were just following orders. Shen gave them a sharp look, making them nervous, and muttered to himself that they'd better be careful. The two enforcers whispered to each other, worried about explaining this to King Yama later. Shen just smiled knowingly. Meanwhile, the Dragon King's remnant soul spoke up, saying it understood its situation wasn't unfair, but it was still hurting inside. Shen fell silent for a moment and sighed, thinking how difficult it was to defy fate when your name was in the Book of Life and Death. Horseface whispered to Oxhead that this Dragon King had recently changed the Book of Life and Death twice, but quickly told him to keep quiet before Shen noticed. Shen, of course, had already heard them and gave a teasing smile, making the two enforcers panic, realizing the immortal master had caught them. Finally, Shen turned back to the Emperor's Dragon King personality and spoke gently, telling it to let go of its obsession. He reminded it that fate had been kind in the past, and the next life would be good too if it let go of grudges. The remnant soul seemed to soften, thanked Shen, and transformed into a blue dragon aura, separating from the Emperor and returning to heaven and earth. With the Dragon King issue resolved, Shen reminded everyone to hurry and not miss the auspicious timing. Old Yuan Tiangang quietly approached and whispered that while the Dragon King problem was settled, there was still the question of how to deal with the 4 underworld enforcers. Shen Changqing heard Old Yuan Tiangang worrying about the underworld enforcers and couldn't help but think they were being ridiculous. He muttered to himself, wondering if the old Taoist really thought they could play judge and hand out punishment. Smirking, he told Old Yuan that while the crime was serious, it was up to the Emperor to decide the consequences. The Emperor laughed, saying it was clever of Shen to leave the judgment to him. It gave him a chance to settle things with the underworld in a polite way. Oxhead and Horseface were stunned, glancing at each other, realizing Shen might actually be offering them as a gift to the Emperor to smooth things over. Old Yuan quickly stepped in to help the Emperor up and suggested Shen stay in the palace a few days so they could prepare a banquet to thank him. Shen thought to himself how clever the Emperor was, knowing how to let people cling to his favor. He simply said everything would go as the Emperor wished. Soon, Princess Changyue came by, excited to show Shen around and mentioned the banquet that evening. Shen thanked her politely, holding the little fox spirit in his arms. She led him to the eagle mews in the palace menagerie, showing off all sorts of majestic animals, green forest lords, polar bears, and even prehistoric eagles. Suddenly, the little fox spirit jumped out of Shen's arms, looking feisty and angry. Shen panicked, calling after it, but couldn't keep up. The little fox bounded across the rooftops and disappeared. Shen worried it might bite someone else's pet and get them both into trouble. Just then, Crown Prince Li Chengqian appeared, greeting Shen politely and apologizing for his earlier rude behavior. Shen waved it off, saying he didn't need the formalities and that he was just a rough Taoist from the mountains anyway. Shen was about to rush off to find the little fox when a eunuch came running after him, shouting that he was an insolent fool. Shen turned, arms crossed, challenging him, asking who exactly was being called insolent. The eunuch repeated it, doubling down, and Shen just stared at him down, ready to see what would happen next. The eunuch called Shen an insolent fool and ran to fetch the guards, sword pointed. Shen just smirked and teased that the eunuch was claiming royal dignity for himself. Then a guard barked orders, but Princess Changyu cut in and told everyone to stand down. Shen was there by the emperor's summons. The guards quickly dropped to the ground and begged forgiveness. Shen turned to the crown prince and joked that he didn't need to bow to a prince, which hit a nerve. The crown prince stumbled, tried to deny it, then kicked the eunuch and ordered a punishment. Shen stepped in like it was no big deal, saying the eunuch had spoken without thinking and it didn't deserve a brutal sentence. He even said he had a cultivation problem and was politely asking the prince for help. The crown prince put on a fake smile, thinking Shen was just after fame. Before anyone could do much, Shen landed a quick kick on the eunuch, leaving him badly hurt and on the ground. The little fox spirit bounded back, proud and panting, claiming it had sorted out all the palace pets. Shen asked Princess Changyu if it was okay, and she waved it off, saying it would be fine. After Shen left, the eunuch staggered over to the prince, pleading for mercy. In a cold moment, the crown prince drew his sword and struck the eunuch, seriously wounding him. Everyone froze and the prince's face went hard as stone, and he hissed that once he becomes emperor, he'll make Shen pay and finish him for bringing him shame. The scene shifted to noble consort Wei's room, and she was fuming. Her face was red with anger as she held her black cat, all scratched up. She demanded to know who dared to hurt her cat and wanted the matter investigated immediately. Later, in the grand hall, the evening celebration was in full swing. Dancers moved gracefully while the emperor, empress, and court officials watched. The emperor, holding a cup of tea, beamed and praised Shen Changqing, saying he almost lost his life, but Taoist Shen had cleverly defied fate, extending his life by decades. He toasted Shen, saying his magic was so powerful even the gods would be wary. Shen Changqing, modest as always, raised his cup and said he didn't dare claim any credit. Then he added some humble compliments for the emperor, saying that even without him, the emperor could have turned danger into safety. The crown prince, listening from across the hall, scowled and thought to himself that Shen's words were just flattery. The ministers stared in awe, impressed by the emperor's wisdom and power. The emperor laughed joyfully and encouraged everyone to drink together. From afternoon until late at night, the hall stayed bright with lanterns. Shen Changqing, completely drunk, staggered over to Wei Zheng and warned him not to worry so much about reputation after death. The emperor overheard and wondered if Shen was revealing heavenly secrets through wine. Curious, he asked Shen if he had any advice for ruling a peaceful world. Shen panicked a little, smiling foolishly, and told the emperor some cryptic words about the fire of stars igniting the source before collapsing into a deep sleep. The next morning in Chang'an, the little fox spirit was curled up on Shen's face, snoring loudly. Shen suddenly woke up in a panic, realizing what he had said last night. He clutched his head, thinking the cryptic words reflected the emperor's autocratic power and that he might have said something dangerous. Grabbing the little fox spirit, he prepared to flee, mumbling to himself that things were going badly. Just as he stepped out, he ran straight into Princess Changyu, who had been waiting there. Shen froze, realizing he was caught. His whole body went cold, covered in goosebumps, and he started panicking, imagining the worst, being thrown into the imperial prison and all sorts of trouble. Shen Changqing didn't dare look directly at Princess Changyue. He turned away, muttering to himself to stay calm. "All right, Shen Changqing, you're a trickster who just saved the emperor's life. He won't do anything to me, just stay cool." Princess Changyu noticed him and asked kindly if he had a headache, offering to have someone prepare hangover soup or breakfast. Shen quickly changed the topic, saying he had a strange feeling that something was about to happen in Jingyang County, so he couldn't stay in Chang'an for long. He decided he needed to find a reason to leave first and see how Li Shimin reacted before making any big moves. Just then, a voice rang out, announcing the emperor's arrival and delivering an imperial edict to Shen. He couldn't help but think to himself that he really did have a knack for getting along with immortals. In the imperial bedchamber, the emperor was talking with a beautiful consort, who congratulated him on being blessed by immortals. The emperor laughed heartily, and Shen thought to himself with relief. His reckless words hadn't caused any trouble, and the emperor even allowed him to build the Changqing temple outside outside Chang'an, feeling confident that he had firmly secured Li Shimin's trust. Shen mounted his horse and set off for Jingyang County. After a long journey, he finally reached the border of the county, but soon noticed some lingering demonic energy following his carriage. Meanwhile, at an inn, a dignified lady was asking a man to help her find a peaceful, quiet house in the county. The man pointed out a vacant room next to Shen Changqing's house. Though the rent was expensive, it was the safest and best place around. Curious, the lady asked about Shen Changqing and his magical powers. This lady was actually the 1,000-year-old white bone spirit who had just emerged into the world. The man described Shen with enthusiasm, saying he was such a fascinating person that even 3 days and nights wouldn't be enough to tell all the stories about him. Back at Shen Changqing's house, the courtyard was bustling. Li Ji was chasing after a boar named Dahua, shouting for it to stop and bathe so it wouldn't be disliked. During the chase, Dahua bumped into Bai Dongni, causing her to stumble and fall. Luckily, she landed on something familiar, Shen Changqing himself. She looked up and lit up with joy, greeting him warmly. Shen chuckled and reassured her he was back. The next morning, Shen and Bai Dongni sat across from each other in a cozy room. She softly addressed him, asking for guidance on a dual cultivation manual she had recently found, worried about some potential issues in her practice. Shen nodded, ready to help. Shen Changqing's face turned bright red as he thought to himself, why on earth did I agree to let Bai Dongni sleep next to me while Li Ji gets to sleep alone? Who could resist such temptation? He quickly tried to focus. All right, dual cultivation manual. Let's see what pointers I can give. Meanwhile, at the White Bone Spirit's mansion, she was sitting in the moonlit courtyard, meditating and cultivating her energy. Ah, this place really is perfect, she thought. One night of training here is better than half a year in the mountains. She raised 2 fingers in front of her face, chanting as her energy swirled. White bone yin wind. Great Tao accomplished, transform energy into bone. Ignite the soul lamp. In a flash, she transformed into a skeleton, ready to summon her special magical tool, the illuminating ancient lamp. Just as the lamp began to materialize, a sudden moan from Bai Dongni next door distracted her. What kind of Taoist lives next to me? She grumbled, glaring toward Shen Changqing's mansion. So vulgar. Determined to succeed, she tried again, pouring all her energy into the lamp. It started forming perfectly, until Bai Dongni's cries interrupted her yet again. The lamp dissipated. The white bone spirit clutched her head in frustration. Why is this Taoist so distracting? She muttered, squatting on the wall and resting her chin on her hand. This old lady is cursed with bad luck. After 2 more hours of interruptions, finally, the courtyard grew quiet. She could breathe easy, transforming back into a skeleton and focusing completely. Finally, she completed the illuminating ancient lamp. Yes! From now on, there's only me in this world, she declared triumphantly, until Bai Dongni started making noise again, causing the lamp to vanish instantly. The white bone spirit's face turned pale as she cried out, ruining all my hard work! How dare you! She transformed into a ghostly figure and shouted, all right, I'll teach you a lesson in your dreams. Her ghostly energy surged toward Shen Changqing, thinking, a Taoist who doesn't protect his own space? Perfect! She formed seals with her hands, sending her magic into his dream. In his dream, Shen Changqing was relaxing, surrounded by beautiful women, including the white bone spirit herself. A lovely figure approached him, smiling. Young master, are you tired? Shall we rest upstairs? But then, in a flash, the beautiful woman turned into a skeleton. Are you satisfied now? The white bone spirit's magic seemed to say, sending a chill through the dream. Shen Changqing's face turned pale as he saw the white bone spirit standing there. Without saying much, he struck out, sending her skeleton form flying and scolding her for trying to trick him. He waved his hands, summoning golden spiritual energy and chanting a spell. The energy formed a huge golden dragon, which blasted the white bone spirit right out of the mansion. She shouted that she'd be back, clearly not giving up. Inside, Bai Dongni woke up from the noise, rubbed her eyes, and gently covered Shen Changqing with the blanket. Both of them fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. Meanwhile, outside, the white bone spirit's skull was cracked and her energy leaking out. Exhausted, she turned back into a skeleton and stared at the ground, furious but planning her next move. She decided to enter Shen Changqing's childhood dream to test him when he was younger. In his childhood dream, Shen Changqing was sitting in the temple reading scriptures, looking adorable and happy. The white bone spirit appeared in a smaller, innocent-looking form, trying to get close to him. Young Shen Changqing immediately summoned the as-you-will gold-banded cudgel, swinging it confidently at her. She was injured by the strike but thought she could try again later. Just then, an old woman appeared outside the dream, calling for someone named Little Quinyang. Shen Changqing used his Fire Eye's golden gaze to see through the illusion and realized it was a trick. He shouted at her, then swung the cudgel again, which forced the white bone spirit to transform into ghostly energy and fly away. After roaming through his childhood dream, the white bone spirit returned, half her skull cracked and energy leaking. She knew Shen Changqing's cultivation was too strong to mess with casually, so she decided to restore her magic quickly and leave by morning. She couldn't stay any longer or she'd be finished. The next morning, Shen Changqing was out exercising right in front of the White Bone Spirit's mansion. When she happened to open the door, she froze, her cheeks turning bright red. She wondered if he was standing there to block her or had some tricky plan in mind. Shen Changqing, noticing her, just smiled warmly and said good morning. That startled her even more, so she ran back inside and slammed the door shut. Shen Changqing stood there, looking confused and muttering about how shy the new neighbor was. Inside, the White Bone Spirit was panicking, trying to figure out what his intentions were. Was he just being polite, or did he want her to help watch the house? She replayed his 3 knocks on the door, thinking maybe they meant he wanted her to come see him later that night. That evening, Shen Changqing was outside talking to Bai Dongni. She tried to get his attention, teasing him a bit and hinting that she still needed guidance in cultivation. Shen Changqing, looking exhausted and worn out, told her he just wanted to stargaze and practice his own cultivation tonight, so she should go rest. Bai Dongni tried to get closer, pressing against him, but he firmly walked away, determined not to get distracted. She sighed, disappointed but understanding that he really needed time to focus. As Shen Changqing trudged away, looking tired and serious, he muttered to himself about staying focused on his life and not wasting his time on distractions. Meanwhile, the little fox spirit ran up behind him, staring at him with admiration and a bit of playful longing. It imagined him being gentle and sweet, which made it giggle and skip around, completely smitten by Shen Changqing's charm. Shen Changqing was outside in the courtyard, staring up at the sky with a serious expression, mumbling about being proud of serving the people and feeling ashamed if one harms the country. Meanwhile, the White Bone Spirit was in her yard, checking herself in a mirror, wondering if she looked impressive enough to catch Shen Changqing's attention. She tried a few different outfits, thinking maybe something more eye-catching would do the trick, and even imagined herself as his playful admirer, just hoping he'd let her off easy. Before Shen Changqing could even react, the White Bone Spirit slipped and fell right next to him with a loud yelp. Startled, he turned to see her and was shocked, his mind racing. He couldn't believe someone would sneak over wearing fancy clothes, pretending to be shy and climbing over walls like that. He pointed his staff at her and demanded to know what was going on. The White Bone Spirit, confused, explained she thought he had wanted her to come by after he knocked on her door 3 times that morning. Shen Changqing realized there had been a huge misunderstanding. He quickly helped her up, trying to explain that the knocks were just a friendly greeting and nothing more. He warned her not to read too much into things and made sure she understood there were no other intentions. Then, noticing it was late and the yin energy was strong at night, he kindly draped his robe over her shoulders, telling her to head back and rest. As she put on the robe, the White Bone Spirit felt a rush of spiritual energy filling her, swirling around her body. She was surprised at how much energy Shen Changqing had given her, feeling both grateful and a little flustered. As he escorted the White Bone Spirit home, he muttered to himself about staying disciplined and working hard. The little fox spirit watched from behind, blushing and thinking how amazing Shen Changqing was, powerful enough to handle immortals, yet always polite and kind. During this time, the White Bone Spirit was still a bit flustered and noisy, clearly remembering the previous night's chaos. The next morning, Shen Changqing was back in the courtyard exercising, though he looked exhausted from all the previous night's events. He spotted the White Bone Spirit approaching and bowing respectfully. She complimented him for working so hard, and Shen Changqing, deep in thought, realized he couldn't get too distracted. He needed to stay focused or he'd get carried away by the pleasant chaos around him. Deciding to get everyone organized, he called Li Zhi, Dongli, and Little Qing over, showing them a new project, opening a roast duck shop. He explained enthusiastically that this shop wouldn't just sell delicious food, it would boost the local economy and help the region prosper. The group of women and helpers were initially confused, overwhelmed by his energy, but nodded as they tried to follow along. Shen Changqing then started giving out tasks. Dongli was told to find skilled chefs and teach them the secret of making perfect roast duck. Bai Susu was assigned to hire strong workers to help build the shop, managing their wages wisely. Bai Dongni got in charge of preparing food, making sure the workers were well fed and happy, calling out cheerfully as she laid out steamed buns. Everyone pitched in enthusiastically. Some carried wood, others pushed sand, all working together to turn Shen Changqing's vision of the roast duck shop into reality. Even though Shen Changqing could have managed everything with magic, he let them handle the work themselves, testing their abilities while keeping the whole process fun and lively. Shen Changqing sat with little Li Ji, asking him to put his fingerprint on a paper as part of a contract for the roast duck shop. He explained that this made the royal family officially entitled to 3 parts of the shop's profits. Li Ji was curious why, So Shen Chongqing explained in simple terms that when the national treasury is full, the government can implement policies that help the people live better. He added that future businesses like pork shops would also share profits with the royal family. Li Chu's eyes lit up as he finally understood why his father sometimes delayed good ideas. It was because the treasury was empty. Shen Chongqing secretly thought it was better to let the kid believe that version rather than knowing the real reason he was funneling money just to stay in Li Shimin's favor. Just then, chaos arrived. A flamboyantly dressed young man named Hu Lai, the son of Li Zheng from 10 Mile Village, stormed in with a group of young men, demanding to know who allowed them to build a house there. He was furious when his words were ignored and ordered his crew to charge at Shen Chongqing's workers. But the moment his men raised their sticks, they froze in fear. Their jaws dropped and faces turned pale when they saw Shen Chongqing, trembling as they realized this wasn't just any Taoist, it was Taoist Master Shen himself. Hu Lai yelled that Shen was just a fake Taoist, but one of the men explained that Shen Chongqing had handled haunted houses in their village and even big mansions in the county. His abilities were real. Shen Chongqing's anger flared, though he kept his composure, warning the men not to act recklessly or cause trouble for themselves. He figured it was better to let the situation slide than stir up more attention, and decided he needed to talk to Magistrate Feng about improving public security in the area. Hu Lai was fuming, thinking to himself that Shen Chongqing even knew his name. Maybe he had guessed everything about him. Bai Susu stepped forward politely, offering to handle the situation herself. Shen Chongqing quickly stopped her, pointing out that sending her in alone would be like sending a lamb into the tiger's den. Hu Lai, seeing Bai Susu, immediately got greedy and made a ridiculous offer, suggesting she serve him for one night in exchange for him not causing trouble. Shen Chongqing's face darkened with anger. He realized that as soon as a beautiful woman was involved, trouble seemed inevitable. He figured a fight might be unavoidable and wished Li Chunfeng were here, since he knew how to handle situations like this. As if on cue, Li Chunfeng suddenly appeared behind Shen Chongqing, gripping his sword tightly. He leapt over Shen Chongqing's head and shouted at Hu Lai, delivering a swift kick that sent Hu Lai's men flying and knocked one to the ground. Li Chunfeng stepped on the young man's chest and raised his sword to warn them, leaving them trembling and begging for mercy. Hu Lai himself turned pale, trying to threaten that his father was powerful, but someone stepped up behind him. It was Magistrate Feng. The magistrate scolded Hu Lai, pointing out that bullying others wasn't acceptable, and warned that both he and his father would face consequences. Hu Lai's face drained of color as he nervously called out to the magistrate. Shen Chongqing stayed calm, hands behind his back, quietly noting that he had warned them not to misbehave. With the situation under control, Li Chunfeng bowed and apologized for arriving late. Shen Chongqing told him it was fine and that the troublemakers had been handled. He then turned to Magistrate Feng, curious about why he had come, and learned there was an urgent message from Chang'an, asking when Shen Chongqing would be available to visit the newly completed Changqing Temple. Shen Chongqing told Magistrate Feng that once things here were settled, he'd head to Chang'an to see the Changqing Temple. Outwardly, he looked serious, but inside he was grinning like crazy, thinking he was really the luckiest guy in all of Great Tang. Magistrate Feng was curious and asked what matters Shen Chongqing meant, but Shen just smiled and said it was a secret for now, that he'd explain in half a month. A few days later, at the roast duck shop construction site, a big red banner with golden characters was hung. The writing radiated spiritual energy, which the young men standing in front of the shop eagerly absorbed. They felt their energy surge instantly, hugging their faces in pure joy, saying it felt like they'd leveled up in their cultivation by half a year just from standing there. Suddenly, an old white-haired man appeared behind them, smiling foolishly with a gap-toothed grin, saying how even a simple glance at the characters could bring enlightenment. Bai Susu, Bai Dongni, and Shen Chongqing watched the scene and felt happy that everyone was taking the slogan so seriously. Bai Susu made a joking comment about how even she could only understand part of the words Shen Chongqing wrote, and Shen Chongqing gently reminded Bai Dongni not to make him the center of everything and to have her own thoughts. Bai Susu felt a little jealous, thinking it was unfair that Shen Chongqing always favored the weaker ones. She tried casting a flashy magic spell on Bai Dongni, hoping to show off, but the magic had no effect, leaving Bai Susu frustrated and confused. Shen Chongqing immediately intervened, knocking her hands away and gently scolding her, saying that people should grow step by step and not rely on these unusual tricks. Bai Susu's expression softened, realizing that Shen Chongqing didn't want her using magic and that the lesson was to live more like a regular person. She understood, quietly accepting his guidance. Shen Chongqing noticed Bai Susu looking a bit scared and wondered if he had been too harsh. Susu saw her chance and quickly acted, pretending to ask for punishment, hoping to catch his attention. Shen Chongqing immediately waved it off and told both girls to follow him to the construction site first to check on production safety. He muttered to himself that women in this prosperous Tang era were truly impossible to understand. Each one a challenge. Susu obediently followed, teasing that she'd wait for his punishment later, while Bai Dongni reminded him she still needed guidance on her cultivation technique technique. At this point, the two girls were clearly rivals, each secretly grumbling about the other, trying to compete for Shen Changqing's attention. Half a month later, Shen Changqing was sitting in the roast duck shop grinning. The shop had been open for about a week, and he was thrilled that if they kept up this pace in less than a year, he and his Taoist family could move into their own house in Chang'an. Dongni's face lit up, saying she'd be happy anywhere as long as she was with him. Shen Changqing laughed and praised her obedience, which made Dongli, overhearing outside, smile to herself, determined to do her best as well. Dongli pushed the door open to report to Shen Changqing, but accidentally caught a slightly intimate moment between him and Dongni. Both Shen Changqing and Dongni turned in surprise, and Dongni quickly excused herself, rushing off to cook. Shen Changqing awkwardly recovered, asking Dongli what she wanted. Flustered and red-faced, Dongli stammered, trying to explain she was reporting on her efforts. Shen Changqing chuckled, realizing she had feelings for him too, and reminded her to just give him the roast duck shop accounts. Dongli quickly handed over the account book. Shen Changqing sat down to review it, smiling and thinking that being handsome sometimes brought unexpected troubles. Suddenly, his eyes widened when he saw that the cost of purchasing goods had tripled. Curious, he asked why, and Dongli explained clearly that the duck seller had raised the price by 30% because there weren't enough ducks available that day. Shen Changqing rubbed his chin and laughed, joking that everyone was targeting the Taoist family because they had money. Dongli looked confused, asking what he meant by fat piece of meat. Shen just waved it off and told her to call the merchants, saying they'd need a huge supply of ducks in 5 days and could raise the price by 50%, bring as much as they had. Dongli was shocked, standing there wide-eyed. Shen Changqing then asked her to also call Li Chunfeng for a special task, and as she left, he smirked to himself, thinking anyone trying to mess with the Taoist family wouldn't get away with it. Dongli, watching him, shivered at his intense expression. At the roast duck shop, Shen Changqing sat at the table with several merchants, raising a toast and praising them for their help supplying ducks. He admitted he couldn't sell roast ducks without their support, and thanked them, offering a drink. One merchant tried to reply, but Shen already grabbed a whole jug of wine and started drinking it, joking that he was punishing himself for causing any trouble with the duck supply. After finishing, he collapsed onto the table, snoring, leaving the merchants worried about when they'd get paid. They complained about the ducks eating so much and all the water they needed, but Shen just chuckled in his drunken stupor. The next day, Shen Changqing led the merchants on a scenic tour, showing off the mountains, rivers, and streets where the roast ducks were now selling everywhere. The merchants kept asking when they'd get paid, but Shen just kept showing them around. By the 4th day, the merchants turned to Dongli, worried Shen might not pay them, but she reassured them that he just liked to drink and play, and when he remembered, he'd handle the business. By the 7th day, the merchants couldn't take it anymore and shouted outside Shen Changqing's house, calling him a debt dodger. Just then, a yamen runner appeared, scolding them for causing trouble in front of the Taoist master's house and threatening to take them in. The merchants protested, insisting they were just collecting money, not causing trouble. The runner, ignoring them, tied up the fat merchant, scolding him for disrespecting Taoist Master Shen. At the county jail, the 3 merchants sat in their cell, panicking and wondering what to do. They tried to reassure themselves that they all had strong backers, but before they could finish, one of their subordinates burst in, frantic. He told them that officials had sealed all their ducks at home, accusing them of hoarding and disrupting the market over the past week. The fat merchant froze, realizing that even their powerful backers might struggle to get them out of this mess. Meanwhile, at the seaside port, Shen Changqing stood with Magistrate Feng and the merchants by a large ship. He apologized for the trouble his sudden whims had caused, but the merchants brushed it off politely. Magistrate Feng reassured them that next time, if they came to do business, he'd help them purchase at normal prices, keeping their assets safe. The merchants boarded the ship to return home, and Shen Changqing and Magistrate Feng watched as it slowly sailed away. Feng worried that the merchants might not come back after this, but Shen just smiled mysteriously, hinting that Li Chunfeng's return would resolve everything. Back at the county yamen, Li Chunfeng addressed a crowd of villagers, announcing that Taoist Master Shen wanted to help everyone have a better life. He handed out the first batch of free ducklings, showing people how to raise them. Dongli was busy buying healthy adult ducks from the villagers, promising to pay market prices on the spot. The villagers were so grateful they set up a small altar, thanking Shen Changqing and wishing for healthy, disease-free ducks. From a distance, Li Chunfeng and Magistrate Feng watched the scene impressed. Li Chunfeng noted that the Taoist master wasn't just powerful with Taoist skills, but also a business genius. Feng, however, felt a bit out of his depth, sweating nervously, unsure if he was being looked down on. Li Chunfeng reassured him that Jingyang County's affairs depended entirely on Feng, and once everything was settled, he would return to Chang'an with Shen. Feng promised he would do his best. Outside Chang'an, at the Changqing Temple, the morning scene was lively. Shen Changqing was in the courtyard doing exercises with 3 young ladies, the little fox spirit and his young disciple Li Ji. Li Ji was practicing flexibility. Bai Dongni focused on toning her muscles. Little Qing was working on her wasp waist, and the little fox spirit was doing a tricky one-arm handstand, sweating buckets even though she was holding perfectly still. Shen Changqing watched them all and thought happily about how nice life was. Big house, talented beauties, and his disciples doing well. The next morning, Shen Changqing stepped out of his room, stretching and smiling. He was enjoying the fresh start of the day when Yuan Shouqing suddenly ran in and knelt before him, eager to become his disciple. Yuan explained that after overhearing Li Chunfeng discussing the Tao with his own teacher, he felt compelled to learn from Shen Changqing and even joked that if he wasn't accepted, he might have to find a quiet place elsewhere. Shen Changqing, a bit flustered, quickly agreed to accept him. Yuan Shouqing immediately tossed aside his sword, kowtowed, and formally became Shen Changqing's disciple. Just then, Li Chunfeng arrived, surprised to see Yuan Shouqing. The two greeted each other respectfully, and Shen Changqing, watching the formalities, shook his head, muttering that it had become a bit chaotic with everyone calling each other titles. Later, outside Shen Changqing's mansion, a man came running in panic, shouting for help. A young man in black clothes followed, dropping a few coins into a wooden box while trembling and clutching his neck, clearly terrified. He begged Shen Changqing to show mercy, looking completely desperate. Old Yuan Shouqing asked the young man to do a quick divination. The guy, still clutching his neck and trembling, threw the coins down hard. They landed in a triangular pattern. Yuan Shouqing quickly explained that the reading showed the young man was safe, no danger at all. The young man, still scared and confused, shouted that he'd felt weak and short of breath since last night and didn't understand how he could be fine. He even warned everyone to stop worshipping, saying the whole thing was a scam. Yuan Shouqing got angry and tried to explain, but Shen Changqing stepped in calmly, smiling a little. He told him the problem was simple and handled it himself. Shen Changqing walked around the young man, making him panic even more. He asked if the young man wanted to live or not. Terrified, the young man stammered about being in broad daylight and not expecting any harm. Shen Changqing then asked him to take off his clothes to check for the supposed unclean energy. Hesitant at first, the young man complied, revealing a surprisingly fit physique. Shen Changqing opened his fan and lightly waved it. Immediately, the young man felt relief and shouted in amazement that he was cured. Shen Changqing explained that the solution was simple. He just needed to kowtow to the three pure ones. The young man knelt repeatedly, clearly experienced in such rituals, which impressed Shen Changqing. After finishing, the young man sheepishly asked what he needed to do next. Shen Changqing told him to put his clothes back on, but to leave the shirt off. Confused, the young man asked Yuan Shouqing why the shirt was special. Yuan explained it wasn't actually magical or cursed. There was nothing wrong with it at all. Shen Changqing leaned back in his chair, smiling, and told everyone not to get worked up over ghosts and spirits. He explained that most problems weren't supernatural at all, and jokingly said the young man's tight collar was probably the real issue. Everyone looked a bit confused but didn't question it. The young man quickly ran off, thanking Shen Changqing for saving him. Later that night, at Changqing Temple, old Yuan Shouqing bowed respectfully to Shen Changqing to take his leave. Shen Changqing helped him up and reminded him to be careful on the way home. He warned Yuan Shouqing not to respond if anyone called him after dark. Yuan Shouqing was curious, but didn't press for details and left. As Yuan Shouqing walked home, the guards respectfully greeted him. Suddenly, a stream of eerie green energy appeared, accompanied by a sinister laugh. The energy taunted Yuan Shouqing, challenging him to see if he could withstand it. Yuan Shouqing's anger flared, and he used his powerful heart thunder palm, summoning dazzling golden lightning. The green energy dodged and mocked him, forming a creepy skull that laughed relentlessly. Yuan Shouqing quickly formed a series of hand seals, sending golden spiritual energy to create a protective barrier. The green energy tried to push through, causing a powerful backlash. Then, a female ghost emerged from the energy, teasing Yuan Shouqing and claiming she would spare him if he didn't resist. She mocked her own weakness and laughed, clearly not taking him seriously. Old Yuan Shouqing, fuming with anger, stood his ground and declared he wouldn't let the plague ghost harm the people of the Great Tang. He tried to push back the green energy, spitting out some of his own power, but the plague ghost just swirled around his barrier, mocking him. Yuan Shouqing didn't give up, calling on his thunder magic and focusing all his strength. His face turned blue with effort, veins popping as he recited powerful spells, trying to dispel the calamity and contain the energy. He muttered to himself that he hadn't fully mastered the art yet, but he was determined to do his best. Just as things were getting critical, Bai Susu appeared out of nowhere, warning him to stop and saying she'd handle the plague ghost. Yuan Shouqing was stunned, asking if Shen Changqing had sent her, and she teasingly said it was her job to manage him. At her arrival, the plague ghost's energy immediately dropped to the ground. The plague ghost transformed into human form, trying to provoke Bai Susu with flirty remarks about the past. Bai Susu flew into a furious rage, her eyes glowing black, and scolded the ghost for trying to use her plague energy. She unleashed her 9 Deaths Yin Ghost technique, summoning countless skulls that absorbed the green energy. The plague ghost screamed in pain as her energy was pulled away, and eventually she had no choice but to flee, vowing revenge. Bai Susu sighed, scolding her gently and hoping she would change, then focused on helping Yuan Shoucheng get home safely. Meanwhile, Shen Changqing, standing by the window at Changqing Temple, muttered about the noise outside and wondered why Bai Susu hadn't returned yet. The next morning, Shen Changqing went about his morning exercises, stretching and enjoying the fresh air, when old Yuan Shoucheng suddenly appeared. He knelt before Shen Changqing, thanking him for saving his life the night before, and beamed with relief, grateful that he had survived thanks to Shen Changqing's guidance. Shen Changqing imagined the worst for old Yuan Shoucheng, picturing him getting attacked with a sack over his head, and thought it was probably because his fortune-telling had gone wrong. Still, he helped him up, telling him not to worry and to be careful for the rest of the day. Yuan Shoucheng, sweating and nervous, nodded, wondering if more trouble was waiting. Shen Changqing reminded him not to do any fortune-telling today and just follow his instructions. Yuan Shoucheng quickly agreed, and Shen Changqing sighed to himself, realizing that if Yuan continued fortune-telling, someone might come and wreck Changqing Temple. Meanwhile, in a dense forest, the plague ghost appeared as a swirl of ghostly energy above a large urn. Laughing, she threw 2 necklaces into the urn, causing the water to swirl around them. Slowly, a ghostly head emerged from the urn, turning into a full human form, a rather fat ghost. The plague ghost called it the ghost in the urn and seemed very pleased. Soon, another malnourished ghost appeared, known as the drowned ghost. She playfully interacted with it, and together, the ghosts chatted and plotted, laughing loudly, clearly excited to cause trouble for the white-boned spirit and her new master. Back at Changqing Temple, the atmosphere was lively with people coming and going. Suddenly, a man in the crowd pointed angrily, warning the white-boned spirit and her new master to face the ghosts. The crowd started whispering nervously, some thinking the ghosts looked scary and inhuman. One brave young man thought they looked fine, but the others quickly moved away, avoiding him. Shen Changqing and the women stepped out of the mansion, shocked and angry. Shen Changqing yelled at the ghosts, reminding them that Changqing Temple was a sacred place granted by the emperor, and warning that causing trouble here would have serious consequences. Li Chunfeng watched everything unfold and quietly noted how incredible Shen Changqing's authority was. He practically felt like heaven itself. No wonder even the underworld dragons were cautious around him. Suddenly, one of the ghosts, swinging a baseball bat, shouted that they were coming for him and the white-boned spirit, warning that resisting would only make things worse. The plague ghost raised her fingers, trying to unleash her powers, but found something was blocking her magic. Frustrated, she realized she couldn't use her usual ghost prison disease energy. Bai Susu stepped forward calmly, saying she would handle this mess, and the 2 dragons behind her agreed. Shen Changqing watched and allowed them to act, realizing this was Susu's old business and she didn't want him interfering. Bai Susu and Dong Li slowly approached the plague ghosts group, but the ghosts charged at them first, attacking with bursts of dark energy. Bai Susu's side immediately countered, grabbing sticks and fighting back. Shen Changqing stayed seated, observing the scene. Suddenly, a mysterious force froze everyone for a moment. Bai Susu glared and then launched forward, confronting the plague ghost directly. Little Qing quickly grabbed the malnourished ghost, while a long spear flew through the air, knocking the baseball bat aside. Dong Li gripped the spear and charged, aiming carefully at the fat ghost, but Shen Changqing quickly ordered them to capture the ghosts alive. Dong Li adjusted, bringing the spear down to subdue the fat ghost without unnecessary harm. In the end, after a fast and decisive effort, the ghost group was finally under control. Shen Changqing looked on and asked how they should deal with the subdued ghosts, thinking to himself that everyone has secrets they'd rather keep hidden. Bai Susu tied up the 3 female ghosts and told old Yuan Shoucheng to escort them to the Imperial Astronomical Bureau for questioning. He agreed and put the ghosts in a magical storage bag on his belt. As he rode swiftly toward the bureau, a sudden burst of yellow energy hit a tree, and a cat-person ghost appeared, surprising him. It didn't attack directly, but instead dodged under his horse, snatched the storage bag, and freed the 3 female ghosts, taunting old Xiaoqing about a backup plan. The freed ghosts hovered angrily, ready to confront him, so he tried to defend himself with lightning magic. The cat-person ghost then attacked him from behind with ghostly energy, while the plague ghost joined in. Just as things got dangerous, the cat-person ghost suddenly stopped the plague ghost, insisting that old Shuqing be kept alive because he was still useful. Frightened, the plague ghost promised to complete her mission of spreading the plague within a day, or face severe consequences. After giving the plague ghost a final final warning, the cat person ghost left with old Xiaocheng, leaving only faint streams of purple energy behind. Nearby, the drowned ghost noticed a wandering soul and quietly commented about her, but someone else warned not to ask unnecessary questions. That night, the plague ghost wandered through the forest, thinking she needed to act immediately because her master in the palace couldn't wait any longer. By the third watch, she was already moving through Chang'an City, spreading her mischief everywhere. She started with a scholar quietly reading, then an adulterous couple in their room, and even a mother and child sleeping peacefully. By early morning, people outside the city were squirming and clutching their stomachs, clearly in discomfort. A young man ran through the streets, desperately looking for a toilet, and in his hurry, he crashed into Shen Changqing. Poor Shen was just standing there as the young man relieved himself right in front of him. Once he felt better, the young man collapsed to the ground with a satisfied sigh. Shen quickly checked if he was okay, then looked around in surprise at the chaos. Everywhere he turned, people were frantically dealing with stomach trouble, some even stopping in the middle of the street. Shen shook his head, deciding not to interfere, and went off to meet Sun Simao about the medicine trade. Meanwhile, the plague ghost sat on a rooftop, smiling proudly at her handiwork, thinking her plan was working perfectly. But her smile froze when a loud voice called out, asking anyone feeling unwell to come see the imperial physician. Sun Simao had arrived to diagnose and treat everyone, and the citizens rushed over, relieved that help was here. A young man explained his symptoms honestly, and Sun Simao noticed something strange. Everyone's symptoms looked similar to the plague, but when he examined them, he felt an unusual chill, as if some weird energy was at play. People panicked when the divine physician seemed unsure what was going on. They cried out in fear, worried that even with the imperial physician, the situation might be serious. Just as everyone was feeling hopeless, Shen Changqing showed up, smiling confidently. He waved to divine physician's son, letting him know he was there. Soon the table was filled with steaming bowls of medicine. Sun Simao asked everyone to try a bowl, and people scrambled like crazy, eager to drink it. Shen Changqing just stood there, almost invisible in the middle of the crowd. People grabbed the bowls and drank quickly, but immediately something went wrong. They started convulsing and vomiting. Shen Changqing panicked, looking around in shock, while Sun Simao realized this plague wasn't ordinary. Ordinary medicine wasn't helping. It was making people worse. Shen angrily confronted Sun Simao, thinking he had poisoned everyone, but Sun quickly explained it wasn't his fault. The people were already infected by the plague that broke out last night in Chang'an. Shen's eyes widened in horror at the word plague. Just then, a medical assistant rushed in with urgent news. The ministers in the imperial palace had fallen ill too, and the emperor had summoned Sun Simao immediately. Shen and Sun Simao were stunned. The plague was spreading faster than they imagined. Shen thought about how this might be a chance to expand his medicine business, but realized the danger was real. He could get infected too. Sun Simao grabbed his hand, insisting they go to the palace together. Shen argued, but was quickly pulled along. When they reached the palace, the streets were chaotic, full of people sick from the plague. Shen covered his nose, looking pale, realizing this was way more serious than he expected. He spotted what seemed like a bathroom nearby and quickly excused himself, saying he had something to do. Sun Simao watched him leave, confused, but then realized Shen had spotted equipment in the imperial kitchen that could be used to prepare medicine. Shen entered, initially thinking he'd come to the wrong place, but then noticed a basin of hot water. A bright smile spread across his face. Perfect. He could use it to help himself and figure out a plan to deal with the plague. Meanwhile, in the Great Hall, the emperor was pacing anxiously. Two of his ministers were sick, coughing badly, and he kept wondering why Sun Simao hadn't arrived yet. Just then, Sun Simao appeared. The emperor was relieved but immediately serious, asking if Sun knew about the plague. Sun confirmed he did, but admitted he had no cure. The emperor looked worried, realizing the plague was causing chaos in the palace and could spread across the country. Then Sun Simao told him not to worry, because Taoist Master Shen had already started preparing medicine to treat it. The emperor's eyes widened in surprise, and he immediately sent a young palace maid to fetch Shen's medicine. At the imperial kitchen, Shen Changqing was relaxing in a hot bath, enjoying the warmth. Suddenly, the young palace maid peeked in, politely asking for the medicine. Shen Changqing panicked, covering himself and turning bright red. The girl was startled too and quickly tried to cover her eyes. When Shen asked about the medicine, she innocently looked around and then at the bath water, thinking maybe Shen had some secret way of preparing it. Without overthinking, she scooped some bath water into a bowl and carried it off to the emperor, praising Shen's unique method. Shen Changqing was horrified, realizing they thought his bath water was the medicine. Sun Simao took it to give to the sick ministers. Shen Changqing stood there pale, thinking if they drank it, no one would believe him. It was just bath water. A minister took a sip and immediately felt amazing, like he had entered a fairyland. His face turned red and he danced happily, completely forgetting his previous illness. Shen Changqing just watched, silently freaking out inside, thinking there was no way he could explain this. Seeing how well the medicine worked, the other ministers eagerly drank Shen Changqing's bathwater too. Surprisingly, they all started feeling strong and healthy, as if a wave of energy had filled their bodies. They praised the medicine, saying it was miraculous, curing them instantly and giving them strength like dragons and tigers. The emperor and Sun Sima were overjoyed, praising Shen Changqing as a truly brilliant physician, though they had no idea what secret method he had used. Then a palace girl nervously stepped forward, admitting that she had taken Shen's bathwater, thinking it was medicine, and brought it to the emperor. The room went silent. Everyone froze, realizing they had actually been drinking bathwater. Shen Changqing's face turned as black as a pot, his eyes wide in horror. He knew he was in big trouble. Without thinking, he spun around awkwardly and bolted. The emperor and Sun Sima looked furious, and chasing him seemed like the safest option. Sun Sima shouted for the guards to stop him. The guards ran after Shen, pinning him to the ground as he struggled. Sun Sima then tried to explain to the emperor that Shen's bathwater medicine had really cured the plague, and that they should promote it. Before Shen could protest, the emperor ordered him to the execution ground, planning to drop him into a huge cauldron. Shen curled up inside, panicking and thinking the emperor was being cruel. Meanwhile, the recovered citizens started talking excitedly among themselves about how Shen's bathwater could cure the plague, wondering if it was real or not, but didn't care. They just wanted some. Soon, Dongli and Bai Susu rushed to Shen's side, crying and asking what had happened. Bai Susu frowned, trying to understand why the emperor was punishing him. Shen explained that the ministers had accidentally drunk his bathwater during the plague outbreak, and the emperor had gotten angry, sending him there. Bai Susu looked shocked when she heard about the plague. She quickly told Shen Changqing that she had a way to save him. Shen's face lit up, asking her to explain, and she said she knew who had spread the plague. If they could catch the culprit, the emperor would be happy and forgive Shen. Down in the crowd, the plague ghost had blended in, smirking and thinking that people were underestimating her power. She confidently declared that her plague wasn't something simple that could be cured. But just then, a young man nearby held his stomach and laughed, claiming that the medicine he had tried worked wonders. The crowd got excited, shouting and pushing to get more, believing in the miracle. Shen Changqing turned pale, panicking and yelling that it was just bathwater and couldn't actually cure anything. Bai Susu spotted the plague ghost in the crowd and urgently pointed her out, telling Shen to focus on her. Shen quickly scanned the group and zeroed in on the three suspicious figures, realizing they had to act fast. The crowd around them was getting bigger, making it almost impossible to move. Meanwhile, one of the spectators, a Da, commented on how Shen's bathwater seemed to really work, worrying the plague ghost. She dismissed it at first, but then decided to confront him directly. Shen noticed her charging toward him and panicked slightly, wondering why she was suddenly coming his way. The plague ghost gathered her ghostly energy and leapt at him, claws ready, shouting to scare everyone away. But Shen stayed calm and grabbed her hand before she could actually reach him, stopping her in her tracks. And that's the end of this episode. If you want the next part, make sure to hit that like button and help us hit 1,000 likes. And I'll drop the next part as soon as we reach the goal.